And there we are. Hello. Hello to Breeze. Nice to actually see you in a stream. I don't remember how many you've been to, but it's always good to see my most avid Twitter supporter show up. That's always fun. So, work streams are back. This time we're taking a look at some Deadlocked. I always have to think what the actual name is in North America because I'm so used to it being Gladiator. Because apparently something with dead in the title wasn't PG enough for us Europeans for some reason. But oh well, it is what it is, I guess. So Tabriz, what are your thoughts on Gladiator or Deadlocked? I'm kind of curious because you're like really in the whole Ratchet and Clank fandom, right? Yeah. Looks like everything is good to go on my end, at least. So the first video we have on our plate, whatever, is the return of the Golden Bolt. If we're talking about a pure platformer experience with a hint of combat, 2002 is the right one. But in terms of pure combat only, Gladiator, I say, does it the best. Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised by how well it plays, honestly. And like I think I wrote on Twitter too that it feels more like classic Ratchet and Clank than 3 did. Maybe because it's a more streamlined experience compared to 3, which was kind of all over the place. But yeah, at least that's how I'm feeling so far. I guess we'll see after I get a bit further into the New Game Plus playthroughs. But well, I mean, I'm surprised. I liked it more than I remembered I did. So. Anyways, yeah, this is the return of the Golden Bolt. Friend of the channel. I shouldn't say that, but he actually did pop into chat once during Rack 3, I think. But whatever. His videos are usually very informative, maybe bordering on boring at times, but that's just kind of what comes with the territory, I guess, when you're so information heavy. He's even doing interviews with the devs and stuff, which is it's really cool. You get a lot out of that compared to just looking things up on the internet. If anything, actually, this is what the third game should have been in the first place. Focus solely on the combat and ditch platforming entirely. Yeah, kind of, but then even Gladiator does have a lot of platforming. Or, well, maybe not a lot of platforming, but there's some, right? Swing shot targets and even grind rails, which 3 just didn't have any of. Which is also why I thought it felt a bit more like classic Ratchet and Clank than 3 ever did. And they also did a good thing by dropping the gadget, or at least relocating them to the bots. I think was a good idea. If you're gonna have gadgets to begin with, especially stuff that you're basically just standing still and using, then relegating it to like just a button press, and then it happens automatically, and then you maybe have to guard the bots. Was a really good idea because the way gadgets, and especially the unblocking ones in the previous games, the way they worked, it's just like it stopped the gameplay and it felt antithetical to the entire gameplay style, especially of 2 and 3. Not so much 2, but definitely 3. So yeah, I think we're just gonna go ahead and that and just goes for quality over quantity when it comes to weapons. Only 10 this time around, and 1 of each archetype. Yeah, that's also a really cool thing though. Oh hey, Lazy Clay Gamer. How was your day so far? I went hiking. I went for a like 4-hour hike, so earlier today. So I barely had time to get ready, but other than that, pretty good. Or maybe even because of that, doing pretty good. What was I saying? Yeah, okay, yeah, the weapons, right? Because I feel like they still have that problem with I don't know. It's just like the how the certain weapons work. This doesn't fit into the gameplay style. Like the mini turret is fine for the arena parts, and but for everything else, it's just like meh. This is something Jay's reviews brings up in his vid on the game, but while the previous games has some great weapons, there's also always a bunch you'll never find yourself going back to. Yeah, and even Deadlocked has that in a somewhat like. For me, was the fusion rifle, which is just who cares. I only ended up like going like no scoping with it because I wanted to upgrade it, and that's like in every single game. I never use it for its intended use. Maybe a bit more in Deadlocked, but like I don't know. I don't understand why they have to include that weapon. If they just had it as a multiplayer exclusive weapon, then fine, because with PvP it's a bit more interesting to use, but as a PvE game, and also one that uses a lot of time in closed off arenas, why have a long distance sniper rifle? It just doesn't make sense. Ratchet Deadlocked is my second favorite Ratchet & Clank game in the PS2 era. You know what? I'm starting to agree with that. I like obviously I like the first one the best, and then probably Gladiator, then 2, then 3. Oh wait, but there's also well, that was a PSP game. I mean, size matters. Don't remember too much about that. It's gonna be interesting to revisit, but I think I like that well enough. Well, in the fusion rifle's case, you at least get a reticle with it, meaning no real difficulty comes from aiming with it, unlike the other sniper rifles. Do you? I don't remember, but do you actually get a reticle? I think you get... Huh. No, I don't think I ever got one. I mean, obviously when zoomed in, right? But what made Deadlocked addicting to play for me personally is the higher difficulty modes. By far the hardest Ratchet & Clank game I've played. Yeah, definitely. The difficulty slider, or well, difficulty levels, great. I like it. I have a few questions regarding them. I'm not sure. I haven't played too much with it yet. I've just been going on contestant with it, which is like the 2-star one, just to kind of go through it as like kind of like in a normal playthrough, right? But I'm curious as to whether you get more rewards or more weapon experience for playing on a higher difficulty. Yeah, at least when in Lockstrafe. Oh, right, yeah, because Lockstrafe gives you... Yeah. I just turned off Lockstrafe immediately. I'm not playing a Ratchet & Clank game in Lockstrafe. And compared to Rack 3, you don't really have to use Lockstrafe at all, which I think is pretty great, because certain places in Ratchet & Clank 3, enemies were placed like really high, so that there was no way you'd auto-lock onto them with the normal lock-on system. So you had to like go into first person mode and then stand still for too long and get hit by their attacks. That's not a problem in Gladiator. Especially since you can customize the weapons too, right? With better lock-on mods and stuff. Of course, I'm not quite sure about the alpha mod thing, because it doesn't really matter until you unlock the ability to buy more alpha mods in New Game Plus. Up until that point, you can't. You have like one extra mod, and I think it's a ammo mod. So, and since you can't fully remove any of the alpha mods, you have basically just like one mod you can switch between weapons. So like you can put, you can replace a lock-on mod with the ammo mod and then use the lock-on mod on another weapon, but like it doesn't actually give you a lot of functionality until you can buy more mods. I played on the hardest difficulty mode on Deadlocked, and while I did die a lot, I felt a huge sense of pride and accomplishment. I felt like a Ratchet and Clank Grandmaster. Yeah, and they even say on the difficulty select screen that it's impossible. I'm really curious. I mean, that doesn't unlock until after you've beaten the game once, so obviously you're meant to have pretty well upgraded weapons and nanotech. But I'm curious as to what the difficulty spike will be if you choose the hardest, or well, next hardest difficulty when starting a new game. That's going to be interesting to have a look at. And then actually checking out if it's worth it at all for when you've upgraded your weapons. But we'll see. It'll be very interesting. A lot of gameplay heavy stuff that you're just gonna have to feel out by playing the game. Not a lot of that can be learned through reading interviews and stuff, and watching videos. Anyways, I think we've talked for long enough. Let's watch Ratchet Deadlocked Retrospective Adapt or Die by the Golden Bolt and see if we can glean any facts and fun stuff.
Where do you go after achieving everything you
wanted
to with your video game?
By the way,
where do you go?
I'll try to stop the video as I'm talking, but
releasing 3 acclaimed games in 3 consecutive years. Can you strike gold 4 times in a row? These were the questions at the center of the 4th Ratchet & Clank game. With much of Insomniac Games rolling off of Ratchet & Clank 3 and onto Resistance to prepare for the 2006 launch of the PlayStation 3, a sort of skeleton crew was left behind on PS2 hardware, left to play around and experiment with what had quickly become Sony's most reliable and second most successful franchise.
I don't know about skeleton crew. I mean, this guy obviously has done a lot of interviews and stuff. Find the sources information, but like it doesn't feel like the people left for Resistance until near the end, at least from what I've watched and read so far.
At the time, only behind Gran Turismo. What resulted was 1 story concept that was quickly shelved, 2 gameplay tests that were scrapped and repurposed, a game that shifted directions 3 times before settling.
Okay, 3 times? I know it shifted direction once. They actually intended for it to be a competitive racing game, but then they learned that Naughty Dog was making Jack X, and they was like, yeah, no, I don't think we need another racing game in the same year. So they shelved it. Let me just write down. Was the game made by a skeleton crew, and was the did they shift focus more than once?
On a darker, deadlier Ratchet & Clank 4. Except it wasn't Ratchet & Clank 4, this was just Ratchet. This was a game developed with...
Fun fact, it's actually a Ratchet & Clank 4 in Japan, and they have like an insane box art, just like all the others.
One philosophy in mind: adapt or die. Depending on who you ask, it did both of those things. This is the first black sheep of the Ratchet & Clank franchise, well, except for that one. This is Ratchet Deadlocked.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so that's another thing about not using lock strafe. You can't aim
Ratchet
on grind rails, which honestly just is better because the auto aim takes care of most of it. So if you actually manually aim, you're gonna lose a bit track of your surroundings. But I don't know, just a pro for a pro and a con for the strafe thing mode. Funny how Quest for Booty would come out a few years after this game and kept Clank's name in the title despite only having Clank for 2 whole cutscenes, while he appears a lot more in this one. Yeah. Although, barely more in this one. I mean, he has voice lines, but like, and maybe he does appear in like 3 cutscenes in this one, but I don't know. They kind of sidelined Clank a bit. Honestly, after Deadlocked, all the other Rat games felt easier to play, even harder difficulty. Each game, including Rift Apart, felt too easy, with maybe the exception being Tools of Destruction. Yeah, but the Rat games did get easier to play because they were gradually shifting their target audience to be younger and younger. Probably. I mean, most likely, right? I mean, with how, just seeing how stuff ended up with 2016, that's just aimed at 3 years and under. I mean, you can't deny that almost.
Blow it up! One of the most immediate concerns that came with making a 4th consecutive Ratchet & Clank game was franchise fatigue, not just with fans, but with the development team as well. In an era where platformers were rapid...
I need to watch that presentation. Watch 15 years of Ratchet and Clank GDC.
Rapidly falling out of favor with a quickly maturing player base, just about the only 2 games in the genre to buck that trend featured a plumber. Insomniac couldn't be certain that theirs would have half the longevity of an icon like Mario, but sales trends looked promising. That Ratchet 3 had outperformed the sales of Going Commando was a rare rebound. Usually, a franchise sees diminishing returns with consecutive games. But there's a catch with that. Many of you would correctly point out that Ratchet 3 was much less of a platforming game than either of the first 2 Ratchet games, and the developer would agree with you. Up Your Arsenal, and to a much larger extent Deadlocked, were in many ways inspired by the quickly evolving industry trends at the time. Even while the first Ratchet & Clank game was still in development, titles like Grand Theft Auto 3 and Halo changed the face of console gaming.
Big inspiration, and it's
That's
pretty
no exaggeration.
obvious,
It's the fastest metamorphosis that this industry has ever seen. And in the few weeks after Up Your Arsenal first hit store shelves, Halo 2 ensured that nothing would be the same again. Having accomplished everything they sought out to with Ratchet & Clank by the time of Up Your Arsenal, and with a much smaller crew to man the ship for this next title, Insomniac took the opportunity to get incredibly experimental. The first of these experiments is the one that some of you likely already know, a narrative experiment then titled Ratchet & Clank Nexus. Revealed in 2012 for the franchise's 10th anniversary, this idea pitched a single-planet adventure rather than a galaxy-sprawling one, a planet torn apart by civil war, and the plot would focus heavily on Ratchet and Clank disagreeing about which side of the war was in the right. It's interesting that this is the game we've seen shared by Insomniac as a peek behind the curtain, because according to some Deadlocked developers
so that's
with whom
like
I
the
spoke
first
while
pivot, I guess. Yeah, probably. That's like the first pivot, going from Nexus to whatever the racing game was
Searching
supposed
this
to be.
episode, this idea may never have even made it off of paper. The idea was shelved early on, with pieces such as the One Planet idea or the name Nexus later being used in some of the more experimental PS3 games way down the road. Far more interesting than Nexus, though, are the concepts that did make it into
Okay, so honestly, it feels like every fucking Ratchet and Clank game from 3 and onwards has been experimental. Maybe with the exception of Tools of Destruction. As Gaming Brit Show once said about Deadlocked, this game is sort of the last of its era. The last game to have capitalism and consumerism as its main theme, unfortunately. Yeah, but even then 3 didn't, like, they kind of shied away from it in 3. But there's so many good jokes, especially in 1 and 2. But like they couldn't just keep doing those, right? That would have gotten old eventually.
Production, more accurately into the prototyping stages of pre-production, or as I'm going to less professionally call it,
and easily the best we've had the theme. And easily the best we've had the theme of consumerism. I gotta remove that heart that's in the chat because it's affecting my ability to read. And easily the best we've had on the theme of consumerism. Yes. Definitely. At least the darkest one.
the throw things at a wall and figure out what might work phase of development. For example, Ratchet Deadlocked may have begun life as a vehicle combat game in the vein of Twisted Metal. Now, there are a few different versions of this story. According to designer Mike Stout, this vehicle combat idea was prototyped and toyed with for a couple months at most before the team found out about another platformer-turned-vehicle game made by Insomniac's old pal Naughty Dog, Jack X Combat
Old pals,
Racing.
so they weren't pals
With no way to
anymore?
justify having
Damn.
two of the same general sort of
believe they
game
broke
releasing
up.
at around the same time by the very same publisher, the Insomniac designers chose to pivot, and these vehicle concepts were worked into the second form of Deadlocked that we'll touch on in a moment.
Yeah.
The other version
I think that's a pretty huge, part of the like the vehicles. It just really shows what they had in store for the game to begin with, because like they probably had so much prototype that they were like, yeah, we're just gonna include this, right? And for the most part, they actually work okay, I think.
of the story that I've heard came from a programmer named Mu Yu, who told me that he didn't remember ever actually seeing a vehicle combat prototype. His recollection was that this was just a fun inside joke that was later retconned internally once they got word that Jack actually did go
Really?
there. In truth, both Stout and Yu appear correct, and there was
But wait, how can they both be correct? I don't understand. This next project, Gundam stuff, oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure they named a planet in Tools of Destruction after Mu. Huh. Cool.
was likely a very early prototype being toyed with that just never made it far enough to be taken super seriously. It's easy to believe that many such prototypes exist beyond just the few that we know about, and that not every developer would know about every prototype. Remember that much of the Deadlocked team apparently had no idea that this Ratchet Nexus idea that Insomniac touted was ever even a thing. Whatever the case, this emphasis on vehicles
That's
did
so
make its
interesting.
way into the second prototype, which, again, depending on who you ask, seems to have taken
mean-
some cues
I'm just gonna spitball here, but like, not everyone being on board with an idea, especially when it's like such a small studio as well. Maybe Insomniac wasn't that small back then, but like, everyone should probably be on board for their next big game, right? I do like some of the vehicle missions in Deadlocked. While not all of them are well done, some of them, especially the ship missions, are still so much fun to play. The ship mission. Oh yeah, you mean the hover ship ones? I don't know. I feel like they're a mixed bag too. I like some of them, but like then others are kind of just like flying around aimlessly almost. Well, okay, actually, the one I remember being the worst is the the race one, like what you're seeing here. You just have to race through rings with the hover ship, and it's like you just kind of drive forwards, and they try to spawn enemies for you to attack or have something to dodge, but like you're just gonna fly straight past them. And it's like just the same with the Puma here. This doesn't control as well as the hover bike. You can't make as sharp turns. So in reality, all you're doing is just driving straight forwards, and it's so weird. They should have just made the hover bike have heavy hover bike for all these challenges. I don't understand why they had to get the Puma in there, because it doesn't control, and it's not speedy enough.
From Master Chief. Following in the spirit of Up Your Arsenal's multi-objective battlefields and seeing industry trends, i.e. the overwhelming success of the first two Halo games, which took on a very similar vehicle-heavy, wide-ranged approach, Ratchet 4 would base an entire game around this more overwhelming success of the first two Halo games, which took on a very similar vehicle-heavy, wide-ranged approach. Ratchet 4 would base an entire game around this more open, non-linear style. And just in case you may think those Halo comparisons are unwarranted, let me introduce you to this game's Warthog knockoff, the Puma.
I like to call it.
Okay, so the first pivot was from Nexus, the second pivot was from a racing game, and the third pivot, was from having huge open worlds that you can traverse and do stuff out of order or whatever, right? Vehicle heavy. There is 3 Halo levels with vehicles in Halo 2. Yeah, super vehicle heavy. I mean, those vehicles were super heavy, is what I meant to say, right?
Warthog? Why Warthog? I mean, it doesn't really look like a pig.
Say that again.
I think it looks more like a Puma.
What in Sam hell is a Puma?
Yeah, it's a red versus blue joke. Ask your parents about it. However, due to the PS2's limitations and limitations with time, a running issue with Ratchet and Clank up to this point, there seemed to be struggles putting together a reliable pathfinding system for enemies and an issue with Ratchet.
I think it looks more like a Puma.
What in Sam hell is a Puma?
Yeah, it's a red versus blue joke. Ask your parents about it. However, due to the PS2's limitations and limitations with time, a running issue with Ratchet and Clank up to this point, there seemed to be struggles putting together a reliable pathfinding system for enemies and allied combat bots in this larger overworld. See, in the first 3 Ratchet games, all enemies had to worry about...
Oh, so that's kind of why they, okay, I see. Let's actually write that down. Reason for pivot from a large world type game was lack of time and difficulty in enemy pathing, seemingly. For a long time, I've always wanted to see Deadlocked get a remake with destructible environments, but after the 2016 game, I would definitely prefer if Insomniac never touched Deadlocked. Actually, you know what? I believe in Insomniac. They probably learned their lesson from 2016, especially from like the story. They could probably be able to remake Deadlocked and just keep the story as is, or well, at least maybe even flesh it out, because the story in Deadlocked is barely a story at all, to be honest. I'd like to see the boss characters, for example, get more fleshed out, because the only times you see them other than Ace Hardlight is like right before you fight them and then they're dead and never to be seen again. But yeah, Deadlocked with destructible environments would be super cool, dude. Just like a game with destructible environments with weapons like the ones in Ratchet and Clank, that's a great idea.
Invisible line in the sand. If the player crossed that, it was fighting time. This whole system was smoke and mirrors to give you the illusion of enemy intelligence. But in a game with wider, more open worlds with multiple objectives across the map from one another, this simply wouldn't cut it. Much of Deadlocked internally is completely different from the framework used in Ratchet 1 that was built upon for Ratchets 2 and 3 because of changes like this, but in the end, those changes didn't help much for this issue. This full-on Halo style...
they're still using the same engine, right? Obviously, right?
apparently didn't work out to be all that fun in the short development time they had, and just wasn't worth any more trouble. But several levels had already been mapped out to fit this ill-fated approach, and so one final change was made. The DNA...
I mean, it's just so typical Insomniac, right? Just making a bunch of stuff up, and then just not using it because it turned out they didn't have enough time. It's just so typical and disappointing, because obviously they never know how to manage their time correctly.
From the alleged vehicle prototype,
and it shows even in Gladiator, because, well, the thing that suffered here was the story, no doubt about it.
The DNA from this Halo-esque prototype would remain too, but the worlds would be repurposed in the same vein as Ratchet 3's Battlefield challenges through more linear missions and objectives. Every one of the wide-open levels that had already been designed would instead be split into a...
there's the reticle when doing a lock strafe. Okay, yeah, that would make the sniper easier to use, but again, why? It's just like a super powerful one-hit weapon.
Handful of challenges in which the new enemy pathfinding could better manage, and to match, the game's story finally fell into place. Ratchet Deadlocked opens up in a completely unique...
Wait, does this mean I actually have to play through the game with lock strafe? Ugh.
...manner for this series, not just for the time, but even today. Rather than seeing our heroes hanging out or putting together some new equipment like usual, our opening, much like a huge chunk of our plot in Deadlocked, decides to look somewhere else than Ratchet or Clank. We're taken a week in the past, to the Shadow Sector at the fringe of the galaxy, where a man named
we're taken a week into the past, and when we're taken a week into the future, and then we're taken a week into the future again, and that's right now. I don't know, the whole intro is kind of confusing.
Captain Starshield is fighting against warbots for an illegal gladiator show called Dread Zone. Just after taking down the enemies nearby, Starshield is gunned down by Ace Hardlight, another Dread Zone competitor who usurps Starshield's spot at #1 on the competition's rankings. And this would be where we jump ahead a week to our usual sort of Ratchet and Clank opening. Our two heroes, as well as Big Al, are at their posts on the bridge of the Starship Phoenix, where...
Alright, we're taking a week. We're taking a week back, then we're taking 11 hours forward, and then we're taking some hours forward again, which is like really confusing. Speaking of destructible environments, it's really unfortunate to see most games throughout the years never embrace it that day, despite having so much potential. Yeah. Honestly, destructible environments is like the perfect thing to use to get you to really feel like you're in the game.
Where the new Captain Ratchet receives a transmission from the ship's former captain.
And also, I remember there was a lot of discourse when a Rift Apart came out, and the foliage wouldn't move as you were walking through it. And it's like, I understand it to a point, right? Because when you have a game that looks so like, I wouldn't say lifelike, but it's supposed to kind of be lifelike in a cartoony way. Not having the environments react to you as you're going through them just takes you right out of the experience immediately.
The new mayor of Metropolis, Ratchet's sort of love interest, furry Bill Clinton.
Sounds like Puddlegate during the pre-release of Spider-Man 2018, yeah.
Clinton's daughter herself.
I mean, that's
Sasha.
also Insomniac, right?
She calls to report the news of Starshield's death. Apparently, Captain Starshield had been missing for at least a month, and only now had the Rangers received intel that he, as well as countless other heroes across the galaxy, had been lured into traps, kidnapped, and forced to take part in Dread Zone. Naturally, this means Ratchet and Clank are next, and Sasha's warning call is interrupted by Dread Zone bots infiltrating the ship and kidnapping our duo, and
Seriously? 3 bots against the guy who just, like, murders these things for fun on a weekday? I don't know.
Gal, since he's there too. When Ratchet comes to, he discovers that he's been strapped down and forced into new armor, and he's not quite thrilled about it.
Okay, now to activate your speech function.
I'm gonna kill Prax.
Oh my god! I was just gonna make that joke. I was like gonna say this is like Jack Jack 2 energy when he wakes up from having been injected with Dark Eco, and he fucking does it for me, dude. That's so funny.
There seems to be a problem with the speech.
There's gotta be, you know, there was like some inspiration coming from Jack 2 with this cutscene, right? There's gotta be.
I'll take a look at it later.
Although he, Clank, and Al are all safe for the time being, they've each been fitted with Deadlocked collars, pending their introduction as a new team in this season of Dread Zone, a show led by this slimy shark, Gleeman Vox. Vox is quietly one of the strongest villains in the Ratchet series, this disgustingly greedy robber baron of a character who genuinely salivates over the idea of making a profit.
Commercials, 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 commercials. and
At least I hope that's salivating. Ugh. He's this...
Where did he salivate? Salivate? Where did he salivate?
At least I hope that's salivating.
Just breathing.
Ugh. He's this caricature of every nickel and diming CEO that...
After playing all Ratchet and Clank games made by Insomniac, none of them feels finished to me. And not unplayable, mind you, just that each game felt like they needed at least a year more of development time. Yeah, that's the Insomniac game's curse. Or maybe the Ratchet and Clank curse? I don't know. But anyways, yeah, you're pretty right on the money with that sentiment, because it really does feel like they're all just kind of missing just a little piece. Some more than others, like 2 and 3 are just kind of, but like they're all, it feels like they're all missing something.
That makes $1 million unethically while his workers make pennies, except in this case his workers are actual slave labor. Dude's even got the stereotypical rich person's small pet, the kind of chihuahua that you'd expect to see in a Karen's hand at all times, except it's not really a dog, it's... I don't know what the hell that thing is, but it's...
Okay, so I really like the story here, because we have we have a main villain who's this like corporate guy who's driven by greed and works with a fallen hero who plans to use Ratchet to regain his stardom. So the question is, where have I heard this before? See, the only good Ratchet and Clank games are the ones that takes inspiration from one, except for 2016, I guess.
It's disgusting. It looks like it'd be wet. According to Vox, if Ratchet doesn't cooperate
Dude,
with
every
the
single fucking character on the PS2 looks like they're wet.
rules of this combat sport, if he refuses at all to compete, if his fighting isn't interesting enough to pull in strong holovision ratings, or if he tries to escape, his collar will be detonated instantly. Although for just a second we see a glimpse of that younger, more carefree Ratchet from the first 2 games, Clank quickly reminds him that this isn't going to be some fun way to earn money and adulation. This is serious, and all 3 of their lives depend on Ratchet's performance in the Dread Zone.
I really like the small, the short return of Rack 1 Ratchet. That's really fun to see.
Competitions. And yeah,
even the first Ratchet and Clank game and Deadlocked felt rushed despite so many people loving those 2 games in retrospect. Did people love Deadlocked though? I don't know. Golden Bolt here is framing it as the black sheep of the series. But I don't know. It feels like people were more disappointed with Deadlocked after coming from 3 for some reason. I don't know. But but yeah, definitely they do feel rushed. Deadlocked is super short. I think I played through the entire game in like 2 hours. I played through half the game. Well, admittedly in challenge mode, but like it wouldn't take that much longer in a fresh playthrough.
Yeah, you heard me right, just Ratchet's performance. Although Vox decides on a whim to spare Al and Clank, those two won't be taking part in the games as fighters. I suppose having Clank on his back would give Ratchet an unfair advantage, so instead Clank stays back at their home base and acts as Ratchet's intel guy and sort of secretary now, which...
Wait, what kind of analysis is that? Just, like, oh, I guess it would give him an unfair advantage. Yeah, that's a really good reason for not having the second titular character being with you while you're playing the game. But whatever, it's not really a spin-off, but it's in those lines.
is pretty cool. Wait, no, that's not cool at all. There's a reason this game wasn't titled Ratchet and Clank Deadlocked, and the decision to remove Clank from the action in this game is one of many controversial moves that Insomniac took this go-round. Ratchet won't be totally alone though, as Al has repurposed some old combat bots to help the Lombax on his journey up Dreadzone's leaderboards. These bots, named Merc and Green, will help blast enemy combatants, hack doors, turn bolt cranks, or even set up grind rails to help Ratchet cross certain gaps. All the while, they're chock full of little quips, stories, and conversations similar to the Galactic Rangers from Up Your Arsenal. Between these new combat bots and the hilarious play-by-play announcing of Dreadzone's two commentators, Dallas and Juanita, Ratchet Deadlocked is one of the chattier games in this series, despite being only a little over half the length of the prior Ratchet titles. My playthrough only lasted about 5.5 hours compared to 8 or 9 hours for each of the first 3 games, and that's doing every one of Deadlock's many optional challenges. All throughout the game, you'll hear a lot of Dallas's atrocious metaphors and lines, especially as some of his play-by-play repeats. You'll hear his pervy banter with an unenthused, sometimes disgusted Juanita. You'll hear Merc talk about his fear of
not nearly as chatty as some of the more recent games, if you ask me. Yeah, tell me about it.
heights, and Green talk about his fear of many things, really. It's in many ways a precursor to the more frequent mid-gameplay conversations that the later Ratchet games would utilize to help tell their stories, and in Deadlock's case, it adds so much extra character to the cast. It adds a stronger sense of place to the world and constantly reminds you of this game's stakes, and of course, it's just plain funny most of the time.
I don't know, does it though? It feels unsubstantial most of the time. It's just kind of commenting on what's going on. And it's not like you don't understand what's going on the whole time either. It's just like, oh no, this is gonna be hard for Ratchet, he's gonna risk his life doing this. And it's like, yeah, obviously.
Enter, the combat bots simply wouldn't have any character at all, as they almost never appear in major cutscenes, likely because partway through production their design shifted from walking robots to floating ones because of that AI pathfinding issue. And what's most interesting about all of this is that it was clear.
And they still have AI pathfinding issues, even without legs. It's really unfortunate that we never see Ratchet Warbot's partner. They were really fun to have with you. Yeah, I mean, they're not the worst. They could be worse. They could be, so much worse. I mean, just look at Mr. Zircon.
Just an attempt to make up for lost time. Deadlock's story shifted gears several times to match the different gameplay prototypes, so the full story wasn't decided until well into production. This meant that Deadlocked would only end up with about 40 minutes of proper animated cutscenes compared to
40 minutes of cutscenes. 40 minutes of cutscenes because of a number of story/gameplay shifts.
To an hour for each of the first 2 games, and close to 90 minutes for Up Your Arsenal. Even with a story that was stripped back, the team needed more than that to get everything they could out of this Gladiator game's themes, so we have things like Dallas and Juanita introducing each mission on every planet with a flyover of the level, an easy way to tell you some story without needing to do any animating whatsoever, followed by Clank giving you help desk style tips over the comlink, which allowed Clank to take a slightly larger part in the story than just sitting back at the base doing actually nothing. It was all a risky experiment, but given how little time and how few resources the team had to work with, it was a necessary one, and it's one that, for me at least, totally paid off. Cutting back on the total amount of cutscenes seemed to drive the animation team to want to pack as much as they could into each one, with more expressive facial animations and small but hilarious moments like Dallas spinning and falling out of his chair while Juanita speaks, or Dallas trying to get creepily handsy only to be smacked, all while their reporting continues as normal. These tiny, minuscule little gags bring out the absolute best in the humor, leaving even the serious moments with something memorable for you to laugh at even long after you're done playing the game. I could genuinely spend half an hour
but all
just gushing over my favorite of this game's cinematics, and you know I'm more than capable of it, but I won't threaten you with a good time. Instead, I'll just say that for my money, Deadlocked is the funniest Ratchet game pound for pound, because it doesn't just save the humor for the bookends of every level or every route. Ratchet Deadlocked may not have a butt joke in the title, but it spreads its cheek all throughout most every scene.
Don't say
As
that
you
with
can
Al
tell,
in the
if
picture,
there's one
please.
theme that prevailed throughout these different sort of phases of Deadlock's early production, it's that the team working on this game wanted to go in a very different direction, that they weren't afraid to take risks even if they might not pay off. And it's this continued willingness to take risks and go off the beaten path to see what works and what doesn't that's actually been both part of the reason that we've continued to get so many Ratchet games, as well as part of the reason that some of y'all are bitter as fuck. In order to save fan-favorite characters like Quark or the Plumber from becoming too overexposed, the main cast in Deadlocked was cut down to just Ratchet, Clank, and Al was presumably chosen as a third because, I would say to say it with me, but I know you won't, nobody ever says it with me.
Ah yes, the three most popular characters, Ratchet, Clank, and the robot guy. Actually, I like Al.
He's pretty cool.
He's funny.
They saw the success of the darker or more serious storytelling approaches that were quickly overtaking the 6th console generation.
What's even more unfortunate is that after Deadlocked, almost every Ratchet & Clank game made by Insomniac never shuts up, especially in the Future Saga. Yup. Yup. And like, I want to just like experience most of the game, right? As much of the game as I can. Which also means that I feel obligated to stop and listen to the banter, even though it just doesn't have any substance whatsoever, and it's just stealing my time. So, yeah, that's really annoying.
Generation's biggest hits, and they wanted a slice of that growing market, of that audience that was growing up with these games. Clank, for example, was lopped off of this game's title and marketing, partly to help this game stand out from the first three as a different direction, but also supposedly in response to the success of Jak 2 and 3, which is
Okay, but do Insomniac just not have a single original idea? Clank ousted from title because of Jak success. That's weird.
Fascinating in retrospect, since Jak's darker direction actually did coincide with more praise by critics and fans up front, but seems to have led to lower overall sales figures than the more whimsical Ratchets 2 and 3, as those games had longer tails and caught up and passed Jak by. Beyond the Ratchet-only focus, most every other step in Deadlocked is a clear response to trends, from the looming threat of a violent death at any point, this brutal, bloodthirsty Gladiator show, the crude humor and commentary on overzealous corporate greed that's been turned up to 11 even when the first few games already had it close to a 10. The goal wasn't to make a dark Ratchet game as much as a more serious experiment, but regardless of intent, it's this sort of darker tone that led to the backlash later on when future games were, heavy air quotes, demoted to ESRB's E10 Plus rating.
Yes.
You know, even though that rating just didn't exist until 2005, and even though Deadlock's HD port, just like all of the PS2 Ratchet games, was re-rated to that very same rating. Speaking of Deadlocked HD,
yes,
that version is the elephant in the room that I've gotta address. I've spoken in detail about the HD remasters of the first three Ratchet
just look
games
at that walk. Okay, just hang on 1 second. Just look at that walk cycle, guys. It's amazing.
I've gotta address. I've spoken in detail about the HD remasters of the first three Ratchet games already, but Deadlocked is where everything went completely off the rails for the port team at Idle Minds.
God, yeah.
Where Ratchets 1 through 3 were all expanded and built upon the same early framework, Deadlocked in many ways may as well be a totally new engine, so anything that Idle Minds had learned while porting the trilogy was more or less worthless here. Deadlocked HD was put together in only a few months on a shoestring budget, releasing only a few months after the trilogy hit PS3, and it is not good. The frame rate is struggling constantly, even where the PS2 version was just fine. The pre-rendered cutscenes are stretched incorrectly, and the in-game cutscenes hiccup every few seconds and just jump back a frame every second or two. There is so much slowdown. It's just unreal.
It's not the cutscenes themselves that jump backwards. It's the models for some reason.
How rough this port is. I was initially planning to record the PS3 version for this retrospective, but I had to tap out. It was actually straining my eyes. But rather than plug my PS2 back in and deal with finicky
making it sound worse than it actually is.
Recording equipment and questionable video quality, I just decided to emulate the PS2 version upscaled to 4K. Did I need it in 4K? No, not really, but it runs just as well as the original game would, and it looks even better. The only trade-off with emulation is that some of the shadows and certain pieces of bloom, including Ratchet's drop shadow, just end up a little bit broken, but this was far better than the alternative for both my eyes and yours. Most of all, Ratchet Deadlocked differs from its predecessors in that it's almost 100% exclusively combat. The basic formula for this game is that each quarter of...
At least the banter in Deadlocked was fun to listen to, especially on your first playthrough. Future Saga banter is just fucking annoying as all hell, yeah. It's just Mr. Zircon. Was Mr. Zircon in the Future Saga? Or was, he wasn't introduced in 2016, was he? I don't remember. But anyways, yes. Enemies talking amongst themselves and stuff, just, so annoying.
Of it represents a Dread Zone tournament that you'll complete in sequential order, and after completing a tournament, you'll unlock a new armor color to signal your progress.
Tools of Destruction.
In the
Okay, so
Japanese
earlier
version,
than I
this is
thought.
Even accompanied by a fun Power Rangers / Sentai cutscene. Why? They were told to. Apparently, they thought it would help the game sell better, and I guess it worked. One medal is obtained for completing all of the mandatory challenges on in sequential order, and after completing a tournament, you'll unlock a new armor color to signal your progress. In the Japanese version, this is even
Why the fuck didn't we get this?
Fun Power Rangers / Sentai cutscene. Why? They were told to. Apparently, they thought it would help the game sell better, and I guess it worked. One medal.
Guys, what? Why does Japan keep getting all the cool stuff? Why does the European and North American stuff have to be so fucking serious all the time? I mean, seriously. Imagine being greeted by this fucking animation.
A tournament, you'll unlock a new armor color to signal your progress.
By this animation, this is each time you rank up.
Accompanied by a fun Power Rangers / Sentai cutscene.
That's so cool!
Why? They were told to. Apparently, they thought it would help the game sell better, and I guess it worked. One medal.
In fact, Goldie even jokes a bit about that in his Locked and Loaded video. Jokingly says the Synthanoids are a little chatty and wish they would shut up for a single second.
is obtained for completing all of the mandatory challenges on one of that circuit of planets, with the exception of the first green medal that you get for finishing that original training course. In other words, the first Dread Zone tournament unlocks once you finish the first 3 planets, and the rest of them will unlock every subsequent 2 planets after that. This usually means that you can actually pick between either of the 2 planets for each tournament circuit, but despite the battlefields being wider, the game is about as linear as the prior Ratchet games when you look at it level to level. And if you really think about it, it's a little bit more linear than usual since you have to complete missions in a set order on each and every planet. As an example, here are the missions from the first Dread Zone challenge, the Robot Burial Ground on planet Catacrom 4. First, Ratchet runs and guns his way through a linear canyon, which takes no more than maybe 2 minutes. Next, he works his way across part of the burial ground, turning a few bolt cranks to activate a bridge, all the while fighting more Dread Zone bots, as well as robot zombies crawling out of the ground, before fighting his way across that bridge to get to the Landstalker vehicle. Again, no more than maybe 5 minutes. Mission 3 features Ratchet piloting this giant spider tank as he blows his way through... That animation is
better than the boring ones we got here in the US. 100%. I wish I lived in Japan. Does that make me a weeb?
Dozens of enemies yet again, this time to get to a small arena up a hillside, again, maybe a minute long. And then in the final main challenge, Ratchet will fight against 5 waves of robot zombies before being rewarded with a hacker ray that Merc and Green can use to open certain doors. That's That's it. That's all of Planet 1. It's maybe 10 minutes total to get through it, not counting the 3 optional dread challenges you can do afterwards if you'd like, 2 of which are also combat focused. One of these asks you to kill a certain number of enemies under a time limit with the Landstalker, and another brings you back across the same battlefield, destroying a series of ancient monuments by defending your combat bots while they place explosives on the sides. The only non-combat mission here, which I guess you could classify as
I
sort
really
of
like these ones, by the way.
challenges you to ride a
They're
hoverbike
super
through
fun.
a series of rings within a time limit, along the way dodging explosive barrels and shooting some enemies if you'd like. This isn't just the first planet either. Finishing Catacrom 4 unlocks planet Serathos next, a poisonous, swampy planet full of giant indigenous scorpions called Leviathans, as well as ankle biters and some more of Vox's Dreadzone combat bots. The visuals, the terrain, and the enemies may be different, but the objectives for these missions on Serathos are almost identical. Run through a couple of linear setup areas, defending your bots as they hack open doors and force fields, travel across a wide open battlefield turning some bolt cranks to open the arena, and yet again we close out this planet by fighting in that arena. At the very least, most of these missions do add the hacker ray as a little wrinkle here. In this final mission, for example, you'll protect the bots from waves of Leviathans while they hack a series of orbs around the arena. Once they've finished hacking every orb, the even more gigantic King Leviathan will be summoned, and I'm assuming he's probably a little bit mad that we killed all of his kids. Also, somehow Dreadzone strapped a bunch of armor to this thing too? I feel bad for the intern that had to do that. Even the optional missions
Yeah,
after the
'cause you
main
know
route
it was
here on
an intern.
Serathos are just about the same as on the
100%.
first planet. Do a time trial on the hoverbike through some rings, and use the Landstalker to kill a bunch of enemies in a time limit. These dread challenges are mostly a way to earn extra bolts and some extra points on the Dreadzone leaderboard, but until just about the final level, you can earn enough points on just the critical path to keep unlocking every level, so you can pretty much skip all of these until near the end of the game if you'd like. After Serathos, Ratchet heads to the
dread
Dark
points are weird.
Cathedral on planet.
By the way, absolutely love the Deadlocked OSTs. A close second for me compared to the first Ratchet & Clank game OSTs. Yeah, music is really good.
Kronos, where he and his combat bots fight through several challenges to open the
It
cathedral
feels like Ratchet & Clank 1 again. It's amazing.
doors and battle the first Dreadzone exterminator, a giant robot named Shellshock. Shellshock himself also attacks Ratchet
He's
multiple
just gonna go on and on about. He's just summarizing the fucking story and using it as a vehicle to make funny little quips. And I'm just so tired of this sort of structure.
times along the
Video
way while you
stood.
try to open that cathedral, but he keeps running away while calling Ratchet a weak little girly man, which, to say the least, is an interesting strategy. It's an awesome idea to have each of the 4 tournament's exterminators keep pestering you during a mission, both in-universe to keep the ratings high, and in the real world to give you a bit more of each of these characters, so that they feel
Yeah, it's just a shame that Shellshock is the only boss that's even remotely built upon. The other two are just like, see ya.
like actual foes
Introduced them
instead of
and
just obstacles on a
killed
checklist.
2
Except,
seconds
get
afterwards.
this, Shellshock is the only exterminator for which this happens. In fact, he's
Oh, wow,
the only
okay.
exterminator
Yeah,
who
we're
has
on
a
the
dedicated
same-
planet on which
in the
you
same
fight him,
wavelength,
which
dude.
is a shame because this level stands out as one of the highest octane and most fun in the entirety of Deadlocked. For all 3 of the other exterminators, you head back to the Dreadzone station after getting your 2 medals. You enter the big tournament, and you fight the boss at the end of that gauntlet of challenges, which means that if you're keeping score, your reward for fighting your way through 2 sets of challenges is a 3rd set of challenges. Yay. But even here, after you defeat Shellshock for like the 14th time inside the cathedral, you still have to go back to the station to do the tournament, which ends anticlimactically with no boss fight at the end because, again, you just killed Shellshock.
I don't know. It's not really anticlimactic when you're not expecting there to be a boss fight, and like with the next 2, like at this point you're expecting the boss fights to be in the on the planets, right? So it's not anticlimactic to not have a boss fight in the end of the Avenger tournament. What is anticlimactic is not having a boss fight at the end of the next two planets. Before you get to do the tournament.
Strange that this only happens for the very first time. It sets up a strange expectation for the rest of the game and for the other 3 exterminators. It's a clear as day example of the game's scope running up against
Basically what I
yet
said then.
another rough deadline. You get the sense that this game may have been intended to be as long as the previous games, and that each boss may have been intended to have their own dedicated planet based on the fact that only this first tournament has 4 medals and 3 planets, and every other tournament only has 2 planets total. As well as based on the fact that the middle 2 exterminators between Shellshock and Champion Ace Hardlight just have a cutscene at most to give us an idea of who they are. Hell, one of them doesn't even speak. It just feels uneven. Plus, based on Kronos' more linear, more directed mission design, it almost feels as if you could expect a higher octane, more traditional Ratchet and Clank level as your reward for going through 2 of these repurposed Halo-styled ones. That said, though, even if Kronos does feel a bit more, let's say,
Kronos is a bit
purposeful,
weird because it has all these places where nothing really happens. I don't know if it's just meant to be a multiplayer map or something, but like maybe it was just a repurposed level like he said, but I don't know.
in its mission design, the gameplay itself is still no less repetitive. At least grind rails are back after being absent from Ratchet 3, I suppose, but even these have a new combat focus to them, forcing you to just kinda jump every few moments to avoid enemy sniper fire. You don't really jump back and forth between multiple rails in Deadlocked. They're not really a set piece as much as an easy way to cross these sometimes messy maps and get from point A to B without overusing vehicles like the hover ship. In many ways, the return of
The one thing about Deadlocked that doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, is the use of colors. While not as good as Ratchet & Clank 1, Deadlocked still uses colors throughout each level effectively, especially compared to Ratchet & Clank 3. Yeah, I agree. And the locations are pretty varied too.
the grind rails feels almost like an obligatory thing rather than some triumphant
So,
return. Even
yeah.
more so since you obtain
I like
the
the level
grind
design
cable
way
gadget
more than
right
Rack 3.
before Chronos, and
That's for
after
sure.
this you pretty much don't get any new gadgets introduced or used. The game just gives you most of what it has to offer right up front because that's where they had the most time to work. And even though we're ostensibly only a quarter of the way through this game, by this point we'll already have, or at least have the ability to buy, 6 of Deadlock's 10 total weapons. From the dual Viper pistols to the magma cannon shotgun, to a bomb launcher, a mine launcher, a shield launcher, even to a sniper launcher.
Oh right, yeah, the mine launcher too. What a shitty weapon, dude. It doesn't deal damage, and its use is like super limited for anything but like just throwing some bombs out there in between waves before the enemies spawn. Yeah, it just
What's
doesn't really
The
fit.
sniper rifle doesn't even launch snipers. All right, well that's kind of boring. None of these 6 weapons will break new ground compared to the series' usually creative arsenals. In fact, of the 10
And
weapons,
yet the game ended up being critiqued for not being as colorful as 3. Oh yeah, Ratchet & Clank 3. The game with a palette of 2 or 3 colors. Much better than the Mind Glove from 2002 at least. Hey, you leave the Mind Glove alone. But it's basically this. Okay, yeah, it's better because the mines can actually levitate upwards now. So yeah, instantly better, I agree.
only one is really a new idea at all. Later in the game, we'll unlock a
Which
rocket
one?
launcher, Vox's devastating.
No, seriously, which one? Which weapon is a new idea? Is he talking about the flail? Because basically, there was a thing called the plasma whip in 2, and that was a melee weapon. The only difference is that the flail has like a big area effect where it lands, but practically the whip has the almost exact same area effect as the flail when you use it.
Rhino knockoff, and the mini turret launcher, which at least has a fun little callback in that gun's description.
Actually, I just found out on my latest from 2002, the mines, at least the gold variation, do home in on enemies from above. Really? I was pretty sure they only levitated slightly above the ground. Huh. That's interesting.
Apparently,
Maybe the gold version is different because I never used the Mind Glove. I used it in the video because I kind of had to, but
in universe,
yeah.
Vox stole the
I
mini
don't
turret
remember it
launcher from
levitating
Megacorp's
upwards.
patent, but Megacorp stopped trying to sue Vox Industries when Vox forced Megacorp's lawyers to compete in Dread Zone. Great little piece of continuity. The only new weapon is the Scorpion Flail, which, incidentally, is my favorite weapon in Ratchet Deadlocked. We'll touch on the reasons why this arsenal was chosen in a moment, but at first glance, even the weapon lineup feels sort of like a greatest hits retread of what players have.
The grind rails throughout the Ratchet and Clank games, especially in the Future Saga, never felt like they had enough focus to be fun to play. It just felt like going from point A to B, at least to me. Yes, you have a point. Although I'd counter with the grind rails in 1 especially was more supposed to be platforming challenges. There was a lot of jumping over things and also between rails. But after that, I do agree. They were like just A to B. And especially in Deadlocked, although there is a bit of jumping and stuff here as well, but it's mostly A to B. But the thing is, I'd rather have there be grind rails than not at all, because I really like the grind rails. There's no deeper reason than that. I just really like the grind rails and how they look. I don't know. It's like just something Sonic about them, right? And I really like Sonic. Like, grind rails in Sonic are the best thing ever.
Had already seen. And the thing with Deadlocked is, we're only a quarter of the way through the levels, and I've actually already covered most of the bases with this game. Our main plot doesn't exactly twist or turn. Ratchet's goal is to work his way through each of the 4 Dread Zone tournaments, completing whatever challenges Vox throws his way, while Clank and Al try to figure out a way to escape without being beheaded. Each of these tournaments culminates in a battle against one of the 4 Exterminators, the best and, more importantly, most marketable gladiators that
By the way, how the hell didn't they execute Al when he got caught removing Clank's collar? Just a thought.
Has to offer in order for Ratchet to unlock the next tournament. Our goals are clear from the start, our progression is clearly split into 4 chunks, and our path to get there is going to be pretty much exclusively combat, with little to no platforming to be found at all. Even with Ratchet as the
there's a lot of platforming in Gladiator, especially in the tournaments. There is a lot in the levels too. I don't know. I don't get where this is coming from, because I think there's more platforming in Gladiator, despite it being a much shorter game, than in the entirety of 3. Maybe I'm being a bit hyperbolic. Maybe that's some hyperbole. Goddamn, I can never say that word right. But like, that's how it feels. Maybe it's because it's shorter and more focused than 3, but
yeah. The whole focus of this game without Clank on his back anymore, he's not exactly the focus when you really think about it. I mentioned that there are about 40 minutes of cutscenes throughout this game, but
yeah, he's got a point. Ratchet is like kind of sidelined too.
Of that,
there's no one for him to interact with, so the focus is actually on the oh my god, the two guys, people commenting, damn, the anchors.
Takes place before your first battle as the setup and exposition. Most of that remaining half hour of cutscenes tends to either focus on our main villains, Gleeman Vox and his champion exterminator Ace Hardlight, as Vox bickers about Ace's low merch sales and Ace grows more and more jealous of Ratchet's ballooning popularity, or it features Vox's attempts to crush Ratchet's popularity by slandering him via clearly hilariously fake stories on Vox News.
After making his fortune selling cigarettes to children, Ratchet went on to pilot a tanker ship for Zexon.
Who can forget these graphic images of baby seals smothered in radioactive waste? Little Coco never had a chance.
How could you?
I'm not touching that one.
Okay, so I like some of these cutscenes, but it feels like they're just always trying to one-up themselves as the game goes on, and in the end, it's just like that's the only thing they have. That's the only thing involving Ratchet is Dead Zone making up stories about him, and it gets kind of old after like the 4th time.
If you do the math, Ratchet genuinely gets about as much total screen time via these Vox News segments as he does in person. I don't think James Arnold Taylor even has 10 minutes of total time on the mic throughout the entirety of Deadlocked.
No!
In so many ways, this doesn't feel like a Ratchet game, and it's why so many critics and fans had lukewarm at best takes on Deadlocked when it first released. One review even called it soulless gun porn. Things like Ratchet's more angular, sharper, honestly edgier armor were polarizing topics
even his armor when you're playing as him is just it's a full helmet. It looks like Ratchet, but it's not really Ratchet. Deadlock does have some platforming in general, arguably better than Ratchet & Clank 3. It's just that both games have the weakest platformer sections during the PS2 era. Yeah, sure. You're right.
Within the team that was developing the game. And yet, despite the missions having such a simple rinse and repeat structure, despite Ratchet and Clank often being relatively disconnected from this story outside of the slanderous attacks against them during some cutscenes, and despite this game being essentially 100% combat with no real emphasis on gadgets or platforming to the point that you have robots that can do the gadget parts for you, despite all that, this game fucking rules. Even though it is all combat at the end of the day, we have frequent side ventures in vehicles like the Landstalker, the Puma, and the hover ships so that it at least feels like we're breaking up all of the shooting. Missions will, at their very core, often just be travel to the end of the level and kill things, but thanks to the
look at that. The mine launcher, the hunter mine launcher, it's basically just used as a second B8 obliterator. In that you just shoot the mines directly at the enemy you're trying to damage. So, like, okay, dude, why would you even include this?
Mission objective.
Again, I feel like in a multiplayer-focused game, the mine launcher is kind of cool because you can lay traps for people. But in a PvE game like this, it's just kind of useless.
And the flyover cutscenes. Thanks to that announcer commentary, the missions have some level of subtext to them. In one case, Vox disables an entire planet's meteor defense system, putting billions of lives at risk of imminent fiery death if Ratchet doesn't fight his way successfully to the control center and reactivate the shield. In another, without context, Ratchet may just be running and gunning through an asteroid belt full of enemies, but with context, he's fighting to reactivate a space lighthouse to warn passenger ships of the deadly hazards nearby.
I mean, yes, he's got a point, but Ratchet never really reacts to this at all. I mean, he might as well not be fighting for the planet's survival because he doesn't acknowledge it at all.
Vox will happily destroy ancient burial grounds. He'll pit heroes against one another until one of them snaps. He'll conduct painful focus tests on children in the name of his company. He's not above putting paying Dreadzone crowds at risk in the name of thrills and ratings either. So throughout your first playthrough, you would often feel like this unhinged trillionaire could do anything at any moment. Just about every planet and every mission is like this, a simple premise that's fleshed out contextually as you go along, so that everything you're doing feels important enough and different enough that the core gameplay of just shooting things doesn't start to feel too samey. Hearing the play-by-play announcers or your allies chatting through the course of a battle makes it feel like you're on a team. Hell, you've even got a name, Team Darkstar. You'll quickly grow to look forward to Merc and Green's stories as they bring a new point of view that doesn't feel too forced. For example,
I don't know. Does Merc and Green even have stories? I mean, they're just background characters.
Players get to return to Planet Orxon for the first time since Ratchet 1 and see
Oh yeah, the return to Orxon, really cool. Doesn't look like the planet I remember, but nonetheless, really cool.
What's become of that polluted Blarg homeworld. It's a great callback to the series lore that's made even better by the added perspective of your bots who don't know that you've got a history here.
Sir, permission to speak freely? This place stinks.
Despite that heavy combat focus, more and more as you progress, you'll find that your objectives will require you to work with your bots, or more specifically, to defend them or have them defend you. Because the enemy AI will prioritize attacking a bot or the player if they're trying to turn a bolt crank, or especially if you're trying to hack a door since only your robot companions have the hack array. Even within just one mission, you might run into several of these little micro objectives, and because these bots keep talking to you and keep
Less of a disappointment seeing Orkson in this game than seeing Real Gorgo win already a return in 3. Yeah. Yeah.
Shining as hilarious.
Also, what he's saying about the bots here, I guess that would be fine, but the enemy AI is so goddamn stupid that they keep attacking the bot that's being shielded. So it's like, the bots can just do their own thing while you sit back and watch them draw enemy fire, and nothing happens. By the way, I love Vox as a villain, one of the best villains in the whole series, even today. Yeah, Vox is a good villain, definitely. Like, almost up there with Drek, I think.
Characters without overstaying their welcome, you won't want to let them down. And as you complete all of the different tournaments, you'll be able to purchase new paint jobs and equipment for Merc and Green, such as stronger weapons or armor, the ability to protect you or the other combat bot as one of you is turning a bolt crank with a giant bubble shield, or even a super weapon upgrade that will obliterate most nearby foes like the Rhino, which you can only have them use once they've hurt enough enemies themselves to fill up their super meter. Merc and Green are integrated so well into the gameplay loop that these two feel like partners, never nuisances or gimmicks, and it's never clearer how helpful these guys are than when they take too much damage and get downed, leaving you to endure all of the enemy aggro and fire until you've made sure they're revived. It's thanks to this sort of virtual camaraderie that Deadlocked, even when you're playing alone, feels like a bit of a co-op experience. But if you want a bit more of a co-op experience,
just goes to show how businessmen make for the greatest villains in the series. Yeah, especially a series that's kind of focused on, well, at least up to this point, capitalism.
boy, do I have some news for you.
I mean, they all were, right? Except for Dr. Nefarious.
You see, Deadlock's quite literally edgier visual style wasn't just meant as a way to stand out from the original trilogy, it's also supposedly because having these sharper angles, having quite literally, again, sharper edges, meant that the game's models and terrain were simpler in terms of polygon count, which means that in turn they were less expensive in terms of game memory. This sort of visual compromise made split-screen co-op possible throughout the entire campaign, albeit at 30 frames per second instead of 60. When you're playing in split-screen, the combat bots are nowhere to be found, and both players are instead given all of the combat bots' gadgets, from the EMP to the shield link to the hack array, and more. Player 2 is even given a bunch of unique skin options that are exclusive to the second controller, including Jack. Yes, at long last, we finally had the Jack and Ratchet crossover that fans had been asking for, and it's even a double
the other
crossover
one.
because Ratchet makes an appearance in
joke.
Jack X. When you think about it, that also means that Ratchet Combat Racer idea sort of ended up happening after all. But if you want to stick with the regular old Player 2 skin, you play as Clank, who's an alpha now, which is... I thought he already was an alpha. I've played this game in co-op countless times with friends, and it's an absolute blast, to the point that I wish we could have seen co-op return in a more traditionally styled Ratchet game. And then
dude, I'm definitely gonna have some friends over to play this, because co-op actually looks really fun.
Weapons, that soulless gun porn, and at face value, yeah, no, these guns aren't that special. That's by design though, because once you pop the hood, the possibilities start surfacing. Every gun in Ratchet Deadlocked can be equipped with two different types of weapon mods, the Alpha mods and the Omega mods. Alpha mods will automatically attach themselves to your guns as they level up from level 1 to their base game max of level 10, so that every time you level up, you unlock a new mod slot, and a new mod will automatically fill that open slot.
Weird that they chose the precursor Legacy Jack and not Jack 2 Jack, considering the darker tones of both that game and this. Yeah, kind of weird. You're right.
These Alpha mods can do anything from speeding up a weapon's rate of fire to adding a larger area of...
In that sense, they should have chosen like the Ratchet and Clank 1 version of Ratchet for Jack X, right? That would have been cool.
Effect to an explosion, to increase enemy
they chose the
knockback.
Deadlocked
It can add
one.
to the weapon's max ammo count. It can leech health from enemies upon defeating them, and some can even increase
Like a
bolt or
bunch
experience
of
gain
bitches.
from defeated enemies.
Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. With that said, I just can't understand for the life of me why so many still consider Rack 3 to be the best in the series, even though objectively it isn't. Yeah, as you said, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. It's just that some opinions are worse than others.
With 10 Alpha mod slots open for each weapon by the time you get those weapons to level 10, you can mix and match these however you'd like. Do you want the dual Vipers to fire faster than the human eye can detect? Toss on 10 speed mods. Do you want to...
Except you can't do that until you're in post-game. Until you've unlocked New Game Plus.
Never think about money ever again? Add some jackpot mods to your gun of choice. Omega mods, meanwhile, are one-time purchases.
Oh, dude, even 99'd all of his weapons.
That track across all of your weapons
Respect.
with far
Respect,
more
dude.
versatile effects. Everybody loves Ratchet 2's Bouncer, for example, so why not make it so that any of your explosive weapons will burst into little bouncer bombs on impact? Why make a separate weapon that arcs electricity between multiple foes when you can add a shock mod to do that instead, or an acid mod to deal damage over time, or a freeze mod to... well, you know what that's going to do. These Omega mods put so much strategic control into the player's hands rather than putting the burden on the designers to not only make a few dozen weapons that are at least slightly different, but also ensure that there are enough ways to use each weapon so that none get left in the dust. On one hand, you could definitely say that might sound a bit lazy, but in practice, it feels like it was a quick pivot that was thinking smarter rather than harder. Instead of a Morpho Ray weapon, players can equip a Morph mod to any of their guns that'll turn
Yes, but why would you ever do that?
enemies into flying pigs, ducks, or exploding sheep when they're defeated, rather than bring back the Infector from up your arsenal, a weapon that had a really cool idea but a very limited utility. The Brainwash mod was included to let players turn enemies against each other while still being able to deal a decent amount of damage in the
Yes, but why would you use that?
process.
And that's what the Infector should have been, a customizable mod for weapons and not a weapon itself. Yep.
The result is a
Except it still doesn't work in 3 for some reason. And like even though you've infected an enemy, the bots will still attack it. So yeah, it still doesn't work. It's how it should have been from the start, but it still doesn't work.
surprisingly deep weapon customization system that in many ways inspired the more recent game's Raritanium systems, and in my opinion, this is often better than what we've seen since. And we're not done yet, because this system only travels deeper on subsequent playthroughs. In challenge mode, the mega versions of each weapon, when purchased, will allow you to level up every one of those weapons to a max of level 99, far and away the highest in the series. Additionally, starting in challenge mode, you can purchase multiple of each type of alpha mod to fully mix and match however you would like. Suddenly, those XP mods might start to sound a lot more appealing, despite costing a whopping 3 million bolts each.
Oh, but 3 million bolts is nothing in this game.
Ratchet's health can be leveled up to a series high maximum of 999, a feat that will likely take you a couple extra playthroughs by itself. And since Deadlocked is the first Ratchet game to feature a difficulty selection, Insomniac locked the hardest difficulty, Exterminator, to New Game Plus, which makes sense because, man, that gets brutal. Completing each of the main and optional challenges in the game will earn you a number of stars for each mission relative to your difficulty, and these stars can be used in the Extras menu to buy more character skins. If you want to go for full completion and unlock every single skin, you've got to beat every single challenge in the game on Exterminator difficulty. But if you ever want a break, you can jump back down to whatever difficulty you desire when you're first loading up your save file, a surprisingly convenient touch for the time.
BRB got to shower for a bit. Yeah, sure did.
And if you choose to stick it out, but you just keep dying on a particularly difficult mission, just like with both the earlier and the subsequent Ratchet games, behind the scenes the game will dynamically tune itself to give you the most enjoyable experience possible by swapping between a few different difficulty sub-steps, maybe by adjusting between variants of enemy placement or quantity, by slightly adjusting the amount of damage that enemies deal or take, or a number of other little tweaks that you would never notice if I didn't mention it right now, but from which you've certainly benefited at some point playing a Ratchet game. For every issue that Deadlocked has when you look at it at that surface level, this game is packed full of these smaller intangibles that lift it up and sharpen those jagged edges rather than trying half-heartedly to round out the experience. Really, I would argue that Deadlocked is a game that's only improved with age, as players grew up and realized all the jokes about Dreadzone cereal and toys and hundreds of action figures and ratings and marketing and Al easily falling for blatantly fake news stories, that all of this
that's so relatable today.
absurd. It had teeth, and those teeth sunk right into the throat of reality. It especially hits different if you're like me and actually wanted all of those dumb toys when you were a kid that Insomniac was making fun of, but they also secretly wanted to see made themselves. In a world
I love Exterminator difficulty. What I would give to have that difficulty back. Ugh. What I would give to have any kind of difficulty in Ratchet and Clank games.
where massive companies can just straight up violate copyright and patent law and get away with it thanks to an army of lawyers, things like the mini turret's description ring even truer today. Over time, we've all met a Gleeman Vox, but at least in his world, Vox is an open book about how greedy and scummy he is. For every player that just did not enjoy this game whatsoever back when it released, there seems to be another who today lists Deadlocked as one of their favorite Ratchet games. Now, of course, with all of that said, it's not all rosy here in Dreadzone. Thanks to the mid-development pivots, several cuts and concessions had to be made if Deadlocked was going to finish production on time. For example, at least a couple of the planets feel a little bit underbaked thanks to cutbacks, such as Ace Hardlight's homeworld, Planet Torval. Another world that's great at giving you these segmented little chunks of build that lead to a clear objective by the end of the planet, Ratchet's missions here all revolve around finding out the location of the planet's only escape pod. But once you're done, this planet only has a Ratchet's missions here all revolve around finding out the location of the planet's only escape pod.
Is that one of the dead bots?
But once you're
gradually
done, this planet only has a
going to heaven
optional dread challenge, and it's
That's
a
really
turret
funny.
mission that feels like padding, almost like it was obligatory. When almost every other planet in Deadlocked has at least 2 bonus missions, at least one of which usually feels a smidge inspired or unique to that planet, this sticks out quite a bit considering that it's the homeworld of one of our main villains, a dude who has about as much, if not more, cutscene screen time than even Ratchet. That this planet is only used as a set piece and we really don't get any exposition out of it beyond a couple throwaway announcer lines feels like a huge missed opportunity for this level specifically. It's even more frustrating because the only other time that this sort of thing happens is on planet Stygia, the planet with the meteor force field that I mentioned earlier, which is aesthetically probably my favorite in the entire game.
The closest I ever felt about Exterminator difficulty is playing Tools of Destruction without any armor throughout my entire playthrough, even on New Game. Hey, that's actually a pretty good idea. Maybe I'll try that when I get to the game eventually.
This level has some of the highest stakes in Ratchet Deadlocked, and not
because you can't just actually in all the games, or well, at least in 2 and onwards, you can just choose not to buy any armor.
only does it not have any secondary dread challenges after you complete it, the penultimate challenge doesn't even work properly. According to the announcer's description, the ground is meant to be radioactive so that only Merc and Green can get down there to hack the terminals while Ratchet flies overhead and protects them with a hover ship. In reality though, you can just hop right out and fight all of the foes on foot, and I would argue that's easier and more beneficial to do so since you don't get weapon experience from a vehicle, of course.
Oh, yes. I think you do actually get a slight bit of weapon experience when using vehicles. I am going to have to test this out though, but I'm pretty sure you get weapon experience from bots, from killing enemies, or yeah, from killing enemies, from the bots killing enemies, and from killing enemies with vehicles. Not as much as you do, obviously, from killing them yourself, but you do get a little bit, just to slightly offset the whole having to use vehicles thing.
I mean, maybe it means that Ratchet might get cancer one day, but we'll get there when we get there, I guess. And these two planets are close to back, only separated by the third tournament, which just so happens to feature the only Exterminator boss that doesn't talk or really have any exposition. So this last chunk of the game feels decidedly more slapdash than any other portion. A lot of these...
I just really like how the game gradually becomes, like, gradually gets less and less content.
Later game levels especially are full of little corners to sneak into, some gravity boots pathways intended for Deadlock's multiplayer that could have hidden secrets here in the single player, but no such secrets really exist in Deadlocked.
Hey, guess how many times you actually use the gravity boots? I'll give you some time to think. Just guess.
Deadlocked, ironically thanks to the more open design that should have been more secret-friendly. But since the team was already rushing to catch up to the game's schedule, rather than hide gold bolts in specific areas that might only be accessible during certain missions, the decision was made to leave that sort of collectible out entirely. The closest you'll find in Deadlocked is the occasional jackpot crate tucked away in a corner, which will give you some extra bolts. To say the least, it's definitely not even close to the same, and that little bit of exploration is definitely missed here in Deadlocked, doubly so given that the wider levels should have, if anything, allowed for more secret placements. Insomniac tried to balance this out by including 15 skill points per world rather than 1 or 2, and each of—
I mean, it feels more focused without the need to go off in every fucking nook and cranny of the level to try and find stuff. I do recommend just playing Going Commando and Tools of Destruction without armor. The difficulty spike definitely feels higher and more fun to play if you are looking for a higher challenge. Yeah, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll check it out.
These skill points pay out bolts as a completion reward. These may ask you to defeat enemies in a certain time limit or with a certain weapon, destroy a bunch of Vox's cameras that stare you down in almost every level, complete a challenge or boss fight in a time limit without taking damage. They're, by and large, nothing really
Anyways,
special.
oh yeah, the amount of times you have to use the gravity boots is, I'm pretty sure once to go up a ledge. That's it.
Often you'll accidentally complete 7 or 8 of the skill points just by playing the game normally.
Alright everyone, salty shrimp pasta has arrived, and I'm not sure what to do with that information.
Sometimes getting a few of them in the very same mission. In the
I
game's
might just have to stop.
menu, you'll unlock a bunch of little completion bonuses at certain skill point thresholds,
kidding,
including
obviously.
a bunch of weather effects, a wrench upgrade that adds a freeze and morph mod, the ability to keep Ratchet's helmet off during gameplay, or, my favorite, the ability to customize the game's heads-up display to any color that you'd like.
Oh boy, the fun. Wait a second, this isn't a Joseph Anderson video. Dude, if Joseph Anderson made a Ratchet & Clank video, I would be the first one to watch it.
Oh, it sounds simple, but it's a great little reference to
And
up your
laugh
arsenal's, for some reason, controversial yellow-orange HUD color.
Probably.
Something that was a point of contention, again, even within the development team, not just the fans. So it was a way of saying, here, you pick your own. As you're tackling every Dread challenge and rising up the rankings, you'll feel that sense of accomplishment start to build, but also you'll stare down all of the other names on that leaderboard and wonder what their stories might be, or in most cases, might have been. This is another one of the game's biggest missed opportunities. We never get to see Ratchet interact with any other contestants besides the 4 exterminators. It would have been such an
And not
interesting
even,
plot.
like, it's like, the Ace Hardlight, and then 2 of the others just like barely facing off, and then the bug guy is just shows up and is killed.
Point, if a risky one, for
There's
Vox
no
to pit
story
Ratchet
here.
against another hero in
There's
a
no
one-on-one
character interaction.
fight, a way to
There's
test
nothing of what makes the other games so fun narratively. Well, like, a lot of the fun that's in the other games are just made by Ratchet interacting with all these crazy characters. Like, right? There's none of that here.
Ratchet's morals. The icy planet of Shar was actually intended to have something down this sort of angle, with Ratchet tasked with saving another one of the heroes as part of the challenge. Presumably, though, this was cut because there wasn't enough time to put together a proper cutscene featuring that other hero. So, disappointingly, the closest that we get is the appearance of a couple heroes in the game's final cutscene, some of these contestants as skins for Ratchet or in the multiplayer, and a little Captain Starshield webcomic that released online as part of Deadlocked's marketing.
Oh boy. That reminds me of that scene from Tron Evolution in the death game sequence where your rival is shown off just to get killed in a cutscene before you can fight him. Yeah, great, right? Like, top-notch storytelling. By the way, just like with Rack 1, when you die in 4 hits without the health upgrade, expect to die in just a few hits, or even 1 hit at times if you play Going Commando and Tools of Destruction without armor. Great. Difficulty. I love it.
Fun fact, in that comic, Starshield takes on the Cragmites. No, not those Cragmites, though. Just a similar name, apparently. Oops. It says a lot about Deadlocked that some of my biggest critiques are effectively just me wanting more out of these characters and the world of Dreadzone, I would say. After all, Deadlocked follows brilliantly in the world building and continuity of the first 3 games, continuing to massage this broad world and rewarding longtime fans with references to past games and creatures. Hell,
Just one reference.
even just certain pieces of dialogue.
Oh yeah, you the man.
As I said before, Ratchet and Clank are from
How is that a fucking reference, dude? Come on.
most of this game sort of just passive participants in a story about greed that's taking place around them, and honestly, at this point in the series' history, that was a great move. Insomniac had said everything they could say on the PS2 about these 2 characters, so throwing them in this completely different world and putting the focus on the Exterminators and Vox as they did was a great way to introduce the idea of side episodes into this franchise. And
Okay, I'm gonna go get a bit more water. Is this where I should put like just a live Hassan Piker reaction down in the corner? Now I'll be back in like a minute, tops, maybe even just 30 seconds. And we're back. YouTube rewind level reference. Yeah, definitely.
that came at a perfect time since there were plans around 2005 for an episodic Ratchet
Salty, remember to like the stream, please. Make your voice heard. Yeah,
Clank
that's
anime
pretty
to
much it.
spin off of the series, surprising level of success
And give me $1,000. Thank you.
in Japan. A character like the second Exterminator Reactor gets maybe 5 minutes of total screen time, but he stands out in Deadlocked
Not even.
solely because the team
Not even.
maximized those 5 minutes. Like, seriously,
BRB2.
his boss fight may
Sure,
as
dude.
well just be the exact same fight as Shell Shock, with more or less the same moveset, except in this one, he's more of an absolute pushover than the game's first boss. But
I
his
have given the
cocky
stream
attitude
that
and
sweet,
showboating
sweet
nature
thumbs
during
up.
the fight, along with the
Thank you.
hyperbolized rags to riches
Definitely.
hype story that Vox plays
Definitely
beforehand,
sweet.
cements
Sweetest.
him as one of my
That's the
personal
sweetest
favorite
thumbs up I've
characters
gotten all
in
day,
the game.
actually.
From lowly
Thank you.
beginnings as a high school math teacher.
But baby, I'm giving these kids the gift of learning.
You're pathetic. Get out of my sight.
To spectacular success as a homicidal sports superstar.
We're rich. I love you, Reactor. I was always there for you.
I will say some of these story beats that were cut and
You
some
hear
of these
that,
missed
chat?
opportunities are more
Hell
like
yeah.
dodged bullets. Ace Hardlight, for example, has this surprisingly solid character arc as this fallen hero who turns to the dark side, a guy who happily kills for fame and money.
No, he doesn't. Fucking calling that an arc is laughable. Also, that's the exact same thing that happened with Quark. I mean, come on.
Man.
It's just a
He's an
retread.
exceptionally insecure character who quickly grows jealous of and concerned with Ratchet.
And that's not even really conveyed that well. I mean, he's just an asshat throughout the entire game. Until the very last second, but I'm sure he's going to talk about that in a minute.
Success with being replaced the moment that Vox no longer sees a dollar in him, a moment that's rapidly approaching, it seems. In many ways, he feels like a broken
I was like, wasn't the series antagonist a fallen hero? Yeah, Quark.
mirror
right?
version of Ratchet, of what Ratchet
First
could
one?
have been in another life, say if he didn't have a Clank to help keep him on track. And to lean into this subtext, here's the dodged bullet by the way, Insomniac early on thought about making Ace a Lombax to make his game-long feud with
Oh
Ratchet
my god, that would have been so funny, dude. Especially considering the games going forward. Oh my god. Especially considering they just kind of fucking yeeted Angela out of the entire timeline.
even more personal. Instead, they decided to save that Lombax plotline for its own game and storyline separately later on. A storyline that 16 years, a handful of teases, and 41 games later, they still haven't fully addressed. Maybe
41,
one
huh?
day. I wouldn't hold my breath though. Effectively, Deadlocked is the kind of uneven game where for everything I love and can praise, there's a trade-off that I can't say baffles me. They're negatives
Wait,
that
he's not going to talk about the like heroic dying of Ace Hardlight?
Understand, but they're ones that frustrate nevertheless. For all the talk early on about a vehicle combat game being prototyped, the vehicles really aren't featured all that much in this game's story mode. A lot.
Good. Seriously, good. It's a Ratchet & Clank game, not a fucking Halo clone with heavy vehicles. No, but like it's a Ratchet & Clank game, right? You're supposed to be on your feet, killing enemies with weapons.
A lot of them are for optional bonus missions, and even then, the Landstalker is the only vehicle that I would call new. Most of the time when you see a vehicle, it's either to cover up a wide-open, arguably barren map.
I feel like every rack review comes down to, I love this game, it fucking sucks.
It's part of a mission that lasts 60 seconds, or like I just said, it's a mission that's optional to begin with, or some combination of the three. Having a higher level cap for weapons means that there's rarely a need to stop using a specific weapon just because it's maxed out, but at the same time, it means that some players might favor just their favorite weapon until it's maxed and end up running into trouble in a hard encounter when none of their other weapons are strong enough. Despite the game's checkpoints being...
Not really. That's why you have the feeder enemies, right? So you can level up the bad weapons. Like, those are enemies that are just gonna die in one hit anyways, so... And they give a ton... They actually do give a ton of EXP. Like, I bought the ultimate weapon for 2 million bolts, and I killed, like, 4 of those little creepers, and the weapon fucking leveled up. That was hilarious.
Incredibly forgiving, the Dread Zone Station Arena doesn't feature a built-in vendor like the arenas in Ratchet 2 and 3 did. And worse yet,
that's really... Oh my god, I forgot to write that down. I really should, because that's super annoying. Random thoughts. Arena match... list? Doesn't have a built-in vendor. Really annoying.
Your ammo often doesn't reset after dying or finishing a mission, meaning that you'll have to wait for the game to load
no, it does. It often resets
back home to buy a new weapon, upgrade, or just refill your damn ammo.
I mean, it resets every time.
Offset a negative with a positive this time, the enemy variety feels even lighter than up your arsenals, but in this case, that's because in a great touch, these enemies scale with you as you ascend through the different tournaments. Their armor colors and the amount of armor they have will reflect the tournament that they're appearing in, and this in turn seems to reflect the amount of damage that they'll deal to you. Some challenges are so short and segmented that this game would have been perfect for a handheld like the Vita, but the PS3 port was so bad that a Vita version was never even considered. Other challenges will have really unique gimmicks, like the one on Orxon where you get to choose between different pathways that ostensibly feature different enemy types, but then because this game seems to have been in such a tight push to release, we never get to see these ideas fleshed out or expanded upon, so we end up...
And even on Orxon, you still end up kind of going through the same path, both paths, for some reason.
With a game full of really neat, maybe half-baked ideas that rarely, if ever, resurface in later games. I think the relationship between Vox and Ace Hardlight is a great example of this.
PS3
Not that it's half-baked, but that it's a unique feature that we don't really see in these games executed in this way. A relationship between a main villain and henchman where the henchman is at risk of being replaced or discarded, but never attempts to turn on his leader. If you think about it, it's another good reason for Quark to have taken a break here in Ratchet Deadlocked, because Hardlight's in an eerily similar position with Vox here that Quark was in with Drek in the first game.
Ah,
now,
yes.
I doubt that was intentional, but it fits in
well.
Oh
no, it 100% was intentional, dude. They didn't have time to write an actual story, so they just copied it from the first game.
How often Deadlocked reuses,
at least that's my headcanon,
or references chunks of the trilogy.
I hate that word, but...
Many of the Exterminator's attacks, for example, feel ripped right out from previous games' boss fights, possibly because they may very well have been if they were that tight on time. From Shell Shock's shockwaves and missile barrages, which are just sort of Ratchet boss fight 101, to the Eviscerator's homing missiles taking a page from Drek's needle tendril attack, all the way to Ace's nefarious-esque hologram doubles. Although Up Your Arsenal had a sense of finality to it, it's these little greatest hits references, as well as an arguably underrated final boss fight that we'll touch on in a bit, that gives
But
Deadlocked
I will give them this. They work. For what it is, they really do work.
just enough of an argument to hang in the same conversation as 3 of the PS2's strongest and most beloved games, even if realistically Deadlocked is sort of hovering around the edge of that conversation, listening in and nodding its head. It's after taking down the 3rd of the 4 exterminators that Deadlocked's plot really kicks into gear, as much as a plot can really kick into gear with
References is a cool way of saying recycling.
only a handful of cutscenes at least. Throughout the first couple acts of the game, Clank and Al find a few fatal flaws with Dreadzone security systems, including finding a safe way to remove the Deadlock collars, and that all of the Containment Suite security cameras are disabled during arena battles. The moment that Al finishes taking off Clank's collar, however, he's shot in the back by Ace with the same pistol that killed Captain Starshield. With his body beyond repair, Al is
He was executed for removing the thing. Oh, I was wrong.
carted off in an ambulance, which is
Well,
surprisingly
not
caring for
actually
what you'd expect from
executed,
Dreadzone. This is
He was
truly where
shot,
Vox and
presumed to be at least mortally wounded.
Hardlight put their full efforts into sabotaging Ratchet at any and every cost, including kidnapping Merc and Green and forcing Ratchet to rescue them from a hostile prison complex, and of course sending them into an
But the thing is, they actually repair. Oh, well, they fix him and send him back.
pending
I don't know,
meteor
it just
shower that
doesn't make
threatens to
sense.
destroy an entire planet. But as we know, Ratchet is Ratchet. It's not like a little death's gonna stop him today. And after these ordeals, he takes down Ace in a one-on... I guess that counts as a one-on-one fight. With the Lombax now standing alone as Vox's only remaining top contender, the Mogul tries and fails to convince Ratchet to sign the dotted line and sell his soul away for merch rights. A vengeful Vox then sends Ratchet to the untested, inescapable Ghost Station.
I really like the backgrounds here. They're just textures that's floating by, but it looks so cool. A lot of levels look really cool in this game.
A Dreadzone course filled with the bitter ghosts
I'm
of
surprised
robots
he hasn't
and
talked about that
enemies
yet.
that Ratchet had
It
defeated.
seems like the plot of several of these games is people looking at Ratchet and just going,
over
yeah,
the course of
basically.
this Dreadzone season. An inescapable ghost station from which Ratchet quickly escapes. Yeah, I don't know why they try at this point. The idea of a level filled with past enemies seeking revenge is an awesome one that we don't see return all that much, probably because robot ghosts are a bit too out there even for these games most of the time. We'll probably never see that again.
I'm a little teapot, short and stout.
I'll admit I have a bit of a soft spot for the ghost station thanks to this vengeful spirit idea, more specifically because of my favorite...
It would have worked better if the enemies actually had any, you know, unique traits. Or that you like somehow recognize them, but it's as it is, it's just like, oh, this is probably just the people behind it just putting on an optical illusion effect or something. If the bosses were there, then sure, that would have been cool, but
favorite piece of dumb environmental storytelling that I think that any Ratchet game has ever had.
It's not even environmental storytelling, dude. It's just like kind of dumb.
So earlier in the game we had robot zombies, right? Robots that died and were reanimated. Well, here in the Ghost Station, we've also got ghost robot zombies. A robot that was killed and then came
I'm back. So what did I miss? Did Nintendo buy Sega? Did someone invent the BFG? Who took my Switch? Lol. Nintendo did not buy Sega. Sega bought Nintendo. Someone did not invent the BFG, sadly. We're gonna have to wait a few years for that. And I don't know. I think Salty Shrimp Pasta took your Switch. He
back to
told
life,
me in
only
private
to be killed
that
again
he'd
before
been wanting
reanimating
one
once
for a while,
more, but
and
even
while you were away, he seized the opportunity.
angrier. So that's
Yeah,
already
see?
amazing. But there's one specific room in this Ghost Station that has, I swear to God, ghost zombie robots being revived by stasis pods. In other words, a robot that was killed and revived and killed and revived and killed and revived one more time, only to be killed a fourth time. The only way this could have gotten better is if at the end of this hallway they used the fucking drag.
If they invented the BFG, would it fall under the Second Amendment I don't know. At that point, I think Earth is just fucking
balls to
doomed.
bring them back one final time, only for Ratchet to kill them.
Get it?
Again. Vox
Sorry.
continues to spiral out of control after Ratchet overcomes even this impossible challenge, and when Ratchet returns to the Dread Zone station, Clank unveils his final escape plan. Well, not his alone.
He's had help.
Yeah, Al's half robot now, which is, well, you know the thing. While Ratchet heads into the core of the Battle Dome underneath the arena, distracting both Vox and his troops, Clank will hack the shuttles to start picking up all of the remaining heroes and the audience. The clever Vox saw this plan coming, though, and rigged the entire station to explode if Ratchet can't deactivate a series of bombs before the timers run out. The Shark even strapped Deadlocked collars to the audience and to his announcing team, who, for the first time, dropped their foe Vox News' hatred of Ratchet and openly root for him to save them and save the day. Mostly
This fucking heel turn is so dumb.
Save them, let's be real. This culminates in our final battle against Vox right in the center of his Battle Dome arena, with the crowd cheering on Ratchet as Clank...
I mean, maybe not when you think about it. They're just like working for Vox Industries, but I don't know. Feels like they should actually, you know, be true to their characters until the end.
Other heroes rapidly evacuate each and every audience member. In the first phase of this fight, Vox doesn't actually do all that much himself. Aside from a sweeping ground attack, his main attacks involve dropping dozens of bots to distract Ratchet, Merc, and Green in hopes that Vox himself doesn't have to get his hands dirty. It's fitting given Vox's character, and fun fact, this includes holograms of a bunch of Vox's Dread
He
Zone.
upgraded the fucking rocket launcher in the first playthrough? Really? Wow. Talk about
bots, which in theory means that
missed
Ratchet might
opportunity.
fight a hologram ghost zombie robot revived from a stasis pod. And if you're keeping score, that's 5 deaths for those robots. I almost got my Dragon Ball wish.
Imagine instead of they were like, this dude is gonna save us? Yeah, we're fucking called. Yeah, we're fucked. Call your loved ones. Yeah, that would be
Really,
so much
though,
cooler.
your biggest damage risk
Like,
here
because they've been fed like the propaganda, right?
is only if you let the fodder enemies overwhelm you, or if you get distracted and run into the fire hazards. It's the second phase where Vox's battle starts to stand out as incredibly visually impressive, as well as possibly a bit difficult depending on your luck. It's very much a sensory overload kind of fight, which fits Vox's manic personality and the intensity that Dread Zone's broadcasts have always had up until now. On top of your usual easily dodgeable missile attacks, Vox has a patented shockwave attack in which he grabs a nearby hovering camera and heaves it at Ratchet. This idea of an enemy grabbing a piece of the environment and using it as a projectile was actually designed and intended for one part of Up Your Arsenal, but it was a bit too resource heavy to justify including for just one random enemy in one random level. Seeing it return here isn't just a great little nod to that enemy, it also simply fits better here in a final encounter. My favorite touch with this fight, though, is that Vox's Drek-esque hovering mech just has so much style, not only harkening back a bit to Ratchet 1's final boss, but also injecting...
Kind of dropped off on 5, but 4? Thumbs up. Thumbs off, yeah. Thumbs up.
This character's seedy silver screen personality to it. Plastered over the front of this mech are a dozen holovision monitors, which will often display a close-up shot of either Vox himself or of Ratchet, taken in real time from this actual battle. It's just such a perfect conclusion to this game. After his defeat at the hands of the Lombax and 2 pretty cool robots, Vox presses the obligatory self-destruct button for the entirety of Dread Zone Station, spending his final moments thirsting over the ratings bump that'll come from trillions of viewers watching him and Ratchet die together live on Holovision.
Get in, Ratchet. There is no time remaining.
But, of course, Clank pops in at the very last moment to save the day, ripping off Ratchet's Deadlocked collar and tossing it into space as they just barely escape the massive explosion. Also, Ratchet saves Vox's weird, wet slug thing, which, ugh.
It's really funny to imagine that every returning enemy he faces is just the devs going, we need an enemy, grab one we've already made.
The escape shuttle receives a handful of transmissions from some of the other heroes that were trapped in Dread Zone, thanking Ratchet, Clank, and Al for the rescue.
It's still unfortunate that Ratchet and Clank never got truly finished. I really wonder so much what Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal would look and feel when truly finished. Yeah.
And again, reminding you
But
of
like,
the missed
I don't
opportunities
think
that
they had the
Deadlocked ended up
core
having by never
idea down very well. So, I don't know. I'm more curious about 2 if they manage to bug fix and stuff.
having you interact with other heroes until the last.
But yeah,
scene
sure.
of the
Up Your
game.
Arsenal. It would be interesting to see a fully fleshed out Up Your Arsenal with less jank.
Ratchet also gets hit on by one of these heroes, Hydro Girl, and Clank picks up a possible new love interest / Secret Agent Clank co-star named Venus.
Why
So much for
does there always have to be a shoehorned in love interest? Why?
making things work with Sasha or that horny infobot, I suppose. That's where our journey with Ratchet Deadlocked comes to a close, with a funny call from Captain Quark and a little reminder that somewhere out in space, Dr. Nefarious and his butler Lawrence are still floating and plotting their revenge.
You know what, honestly, the Dr. Nefarious cutscene is really funny, but then he goes all screaming apeshit in the end, and then it just loses me completely.
I'm sure we'll see them again one day.
I'm a little teapot.
As I said before, despite being a very uneven game at times, Ratchet Deadlocked does more than enough that it's earned the love of many a fan of the series. Especially in recent years, Deadlocked's had a bit
I
of a
don't even think it's
resurgence.
uneven. I think it's more focused than most of the other games.
Perhaps because players saw that it was a one-off
At least
experiment
2 and
and that
3.
later games would return to the norm, or perhaps because this ended up being the first of many experiments and those later ones didn't work out nearly as well, so by comparison this one looks a lot more acceptable. The other side of that coin is that Deadlocked represented a chance for Insomniac to branch out and recognize what didn't work with this series on a larger scale, even if the game does have its fans, myself included. Considering the shifts in industry trends in the years prior, the diminishing returns of the mascot platformer and more stylized cartoony games in general, and the fact that the Xbox 360 was only a month out by the time of Deadlock's release, Insomniac was justified in believing that they had to adapt or die. And more importantly, the adaptation did work, showing the studio and Sony that Ratchet fans, at least for the time being, were a reliable, hungry market, even when similar games were on shaky.
The thing about romance in video games isn't the romance itself, but rather that the romance feels forced in the plot itself. And like with Sly and Carmelita romance in the Sly yeah. Especially in the Ratchet and Clank games, it's just like kind of shoehorned in there, and then it is what it is. But it's like, it's so unnecessary, kind of, because there's no, they don't build on it. It's just there.
Your ground. Did the darker vibe work for everybody?
It's just there
No,
because they
not
felt
even
like it
close,
had to
not
be
at
there.
all, but it worked surprisingly far better than it had any right to. By modern indications, Deadlocked was a great commercial success and became a greatest hits title in all 3 major regions. Surprisingly, this was even the case in Japan, a country which, according to many reports, had not taken well to the darker direction of similar games such as Jak 2. Maybe it was those Power Rangers Sentai transformations,
Definitely,
or
dude.
the special Japanese exclusive Christmas edition of Deadlocked with the
It's
special
the
Santa
mandatory
Claus skin that
hero
did it.
kisses hot girl.
Yes,
Yep.
that is real. Despite its surprisingly strong sales, though, Deadlocked didn't even come close to the numbers or the acclaim of either the Ratchet trilogy or the game's chief inspiration / technically competitor, Halo. It feels weird to call those 2 games competitors, because it was never a competition if you've played both Halo 2 and Deadlocked, I'm sorry.
Another game I think does it really well is Uncharted 2 and 3, I guess it will be. I don't remember if the woman is in the first one. Maybe she is. But I think the Uncharted series does it really well because it lets their relationship build along with the games instead of just having someone suddenly appear.
Still, it ended up being an important...
See, that's the only part where you use the gravity shoes. It's the only part where you actually need to use the gravity shoes, I think.
mark in the series, as well as another opportunity for Insomniac to
And it's like 3 levels after you actually get them.
improve upon Ratchet 3's multiplayer
It's
mode.
hilarious.
I'll admit I can speak even less to this game's multiplayer mode than I could of 3's as far as personal experience goes. Perhaps one day I'll try to join some of those community Discord servers to play some rounds online, because I'd really like to fix that. The general
To be fair, it's not impossible to have natural romance in a rat game, but because of the rush development of every rat game, all romances feel forced. Yeah, But that, like, my point is that they shouldn't have one to begin with if they're gonna force it.
General consensus, as I've understood it, is that many consider.
So Elena is in Uncharted 1, she's gone for half of 2, and then they're broken up again by the start of 3. Yeah, I see, there's an actual character arc going on there.
Deadlock's multiplayer a leap above its predecessor.
Elena, yeah, I thought that was her name, but I was afraid to say it out loud because I thought I was wrong, but yeah.
Thanks in part to sustained support from Insomniac.
It's so long
on
since I
their
played
old
those games,
forums.
maybe I should do a replay
On top of
someday.
adding the occasional blog update to their site in the style of Dallas and Juanita's Vox News reports, a fun little way to build the world and address fan questions such as, what happened to Ratchet and Sasha dating? The answer to that, by the way, is that Ratchet allegedly didn't vote for furry Bill Clinton in 2004. Insomniac included several multiplayer skins that you could
okay,
only
but like Sasha is the president, right?
unlock via the forums.
Maybe
there
he
was
voted for
actual
her.
competitive discussion and technique sharing. Hell, there were even some secret multiplayer skins that were only unlockable if you beat the Java phone Ratchet & Clank spin-off going mobile. If you want to hear more about that, I've got just the video for you. Altogether,
wait for the
Deadlocked had a
Uncharted
highly
Joseph
praised
Anderson stream
multiplayer
video.
that many diehard fans
Hey,
would
maybe
argue
that's
in
an
different
idea.
circumstances
I don't
would
have
have
the
taken off
Uncharted games on my list yet, but that might change.
as a multiplayer juggernaut. Perhaps not in this game, but with some more improvements and additions.
Look at
in a
how
future
useless
Ratchet
the
game
mines
whenever
are.
Insomniac would take their next crack at it. Of course, an over-ambitious scope with the next Ratchet & Clank game would end up leading to the multiplayer and co-op being completely cut from the early pre-production plans, a necessary cutback that inadvertently affected the trajectory of the entire rest of the franchise even to this day. That one might just be the most fascinating development story that any Ratchet & Clank game
look at
has
that
had.
janky
Now, what do I mean
like
by
movement,
that?
dude.
You'll have to wait and see a little bit in the future. But first, I'll be taking a small detour from Ratchet & Clank next time here on the Golden Bolt to highlight a different game, one that's grown on me more and more in the year since it released. I hope you'll join me for that video just as you have here today, and now is a good time for you to make sure that you're subscribed so that you can keep up to date when new Golden Bolt videos land. I know, you hear everybody say that all the time, but genuinely not even a third of you watching this right
Welcome
now
back
are
to Breeze.
subscribed. I can pretty much guarantee it. If even
Video is
another
basically
third of
over,
you
but
subscribed after watching this video, I'd
welcome
be able
back.
to produce these far more frequently. It'd mean a lot if you double checked. And while you're down there, make sure to give us your thoughts about Deadlocked in the comments, because I would love to hear them. I'll see you soon for the next video, and as always, until then, stay golden. This video is made possible in part thanks to my ever-growing list of generous Patreon supporters, including...
Alright. Wait, what thing? What did he do? I wasn't paying attention at all at the end there. He said the metric?
It'd mean a lot if you double checked. And while you're down there, make sure to give us your thoughts about Deadlocked in the comments, because I would love to hear them.
I'm definitely in the minority here, but I still consider Angela Cross not just an underrated character, but also a good love interest, or the beginning of a good romance. Again, in my opinion. Yeah, I have to agree. She's probably the best executed one, I guess. But that also feels a bit out of left field. Not as much, of course, but it's just a shame they yeeted her out of existence after that game. And just in time to see Goldie tease the most important development history of the next game. Yeah. Not even a third of my viewers are subscribed. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna actually say something like that. It just feels kind of wrong to me. Pretty sure you've never said that either. It feels complainy. Let people watch videos without subscribing, dude. It's not that hard. Although I understand the want for more subscribers if you're trying to do this full time, but in my opinion, you shouldn't try to do YouTube full time. It just isn't stable enough. All right, so I think I said it when I had like under 300 subs. Wow, dude. Wow. It's like, oh my, I have 10 viewers on my video and like half of you aren't subscribed. So please, 5 people subscribe to me. Subscribe to Salty Shrimp Pasta. This is how I sound. It doesn't sound like you at all, but I personally blame both the Rush development and the Future Saga for doing Angela Cross dirty. Hey, they mentioned her in what was it? Was it Tools of Destruction or was it A Crack in Time? I think it was Tools, right? She got a mention of being escorted out of the sector. 60% if you aren't subscribed. Video has 3 views. Like, god damn it. .8 of you are not subscribed to my channel. How dare you? Literally, how dare you? A Cracking Time barely mentioned Angela Cross, yeah. I think it's like during the pirate radio in Tools. I think that was where you had the ship flying around and stuff, right? I don't remember. It's been so long since I played these games. I'm actually kind of looking forward to playing them again eventually. But oh well. So yeah, that was Golden Bolt's video. Information heavy as always, but like he still has that thing that all YouTube essayists do, game people, which is just summarize the game and then talk about it while summarizing, like here and there. I don't know. I used to do that myself, so it's not like I'm ragging on the dude for it. But I think it's becoming a bit boring. Should I do a gag where I say, please refer my videos to women? 99.8% of my viewers are men. Yes. Dude, yes. That is really funny. No, actually, you know what? Specify it like this. Say, hot women. Please refer my videos to hot women. I'm sure that will get a reaction out of people. Like, definitely. And also, every woman that's getting your video referred is gonna think she's hot. So it's kind of positive too, right? I'm gonna do that for my next one. I'm not kidding. Good. I'm looking forward to it. That was a great joke, dude. I might steal it. Probably won't, but I might. Alright, what did we think about the video? It was okay. It was a Golden Bolt video. I mean, basically, I'm basically just watching these, or this, or his videos, because he has so much information. Not as much here as in the previous ones, I think. The more I look at Going Commando, the more I ask myself, why haven't Insomniac embraced the ship sections? Better controls, more ship customization, great boss fights during the ship sections, etc. Yeah, I like the ship sections too. They're hard to say, but I like them. Definitely much better than the hover ship stuff in 3 and Gladiator, that's for sure. But like was mentioned in Goldie's Going Commando video, the ship sections, wow, were basically a game in and of themselves, because they had to change so much in the engine or whatever it was to make them work. So a lot of work for very limited payback, I think. Which is probably why they haven't returned. They probably could have nowadays, but Ratchet and Clank now is more like third-person action rather than anything else. They've cut out a lot of the variety, it feels like. Honestly, the ship sections in Going Commando is by far the best ship sections in the whole series. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. 100%. Alright. That was Golden Bolt's video. The third-person shooter with a bit of platforming as opposed to the opposite. Yeah. The next one I wanted to take a look at is the Gaming Brit Show, which got recommended to me by someone. I don't remember their username right now, but thank you. I've heard that it's at least entertaining.
Love or hate.
Also, we get to listen to some proper British accents. The one Solid Sig keeps on posting on Miharu's server. This one? The Gaming Brit Show one? Alright, cool. So it's being posted. People like it. That's interesting. It's been seen a whopping 937,000 times. Impressive. Impressive for someone with barely 200k subs, honestly. Although it is 6 years old. Let me see. 6 years old. Alright. I have usually whenever he and Stripe argues over which is better between 3 and Gladiator. Huh, interesting. Alright, well, this guy obviously likes the game. I mean, judging by the title, right? What makes Ratchet Deadlocked sick? Or maybe he just feels ill. Or he thinks the game is actually ill. I don't know. Probably meant in the positive sense, right? This is a relatively short video, just 12 minutes, but yeah. Despite being years old, I also recommend a Gaming Brit Show video on Deadlocked. Still holds up today. I think that's the one we're about to watch, actually. Same can be said for the rest of his other Ratchet vids. All right, cool. Gonna have to put him in the list. I don't have anything. I haven't really watched his stuff before, so maybe I should do an honorary British accent. I haven't actually what? No, fuck no. I'm not even gonna attempt. You know, the second I try to do it, I can't do it. But like just doing random lines out of when I'm by myself in my apartment, I speak perfect British. But I can't do it in front of an audience, even though it might be small. Alright, anyways, let's watch this video.
It's Ratchet & Clank 3, anybody playing it could clearly see that the game had shifted its priorities away from complex platforming stages towards more shooter-focused gameplay. With its linear, straightforward levels, territory control warfare missions, and online deathmatch multiplayer. One of the problems with Ratchet 3 is that it feels caught between trying to be a planet-hopping adventure like the first two titles, while also embracing more linear, adrenaline-filled maps and horde mode battlegrounds that would feel more at home in a 6-hour first-person shooter campaign rather than a 3D platformer. Content feels thinly spread and unpolished. The adventure-style platforming levels are barren and unrefined, and the more shooter-heavy moments come across as awkward pace breakers to a platformer with a bit of an identity crisis. A year after Ratchet 3, though, Insomniac decided to put the focus squarely on the third-person shooter elements of Ratchet to create a fast-paced action game with the emphasis almost entirely on the combat. And the outcome is a much more confident, polished, and tight experience.
Okay, I need to head out and do some stuff. Good luck with the videos. Thank you, dude. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. I also especially recommend this video on Ratchet & Clank 2002 versus 2016. There's a good reason why many people still remember that video even today. Okay, that one I might have watched. Because yeah, definitely. I think I watched that. It's a good one. Worth noting, this is the very first positive video he's ever made on Ratchet & Clank, coming after his vids on 2016 and the third game, which weren't nearly as positive. Oh, okay. That's interesting.
It's known as Ratchet Deadlocked. Ratchet and Clank are kidnapped and forced to partake in Dread Zone, an illegal combat sport where heroes are forced to compete in Mortal Kombat for the entertainment of trillions. Ratchet is a blip on the radar to those in charge and is thrown in at the bottom of the ranks as presumed cannon fodder, casting the player as the underdog and taunting them to climb the leaderboard and prove the organizers wrong.
Oh, here he is. He's a little guy, isn't he? Well, don't bother getting up for drinks, folks. This guy won't last 2 rounds.
We'll see.
Jesus
Oh
Christ.
yeah, by the way, the HD version of this game you can get on the PlayStation Store, not the greatest. Each level is contextualized as another episode of
No, Vox.
get on the
Vox
PlayStation
Vox
Store.
just has
not the
like this weird gum disease.
greatest. Each level
That music, that Deadlocked music is so sick. I love it. I
is
love everything about
contextualized as another
music
episode
in
of Dread
Deadlocked.
Zone, structured with very rigid missions and objectives. Reach the place, blow up thing, defend the thing, survive an onslaught, etc. It's a far cry from the first 2 Ratchet games and might put people who are really into those titles off with its rigidity, but I don't understand why anybody would say love 3 and then throw Deadlocked under the bus. After all, the structure is very similar. You go to a linear level, complete some objectives, and then do a bunch of extra mission-based activities, like a lot of major planets in 3. Only now the combat is more refined, the presentation is tighter, and the non-stop shooting action is backed up by fitting context and style. Ratchet 3 was kinda designed to be played with a dual analog stick setup, you know, where you move with one stick and aim with the other. But Insomniac chickened out of including it as the default control scheme, probably leading a lot of people to be oblivious to its inclusion and to just play with the less precise auto-aim of the first 2 games. Deadlocked still
so much
includes
better,
that
though.
old setup, but now defaults you to the dual sticks and gives you a Halo Combat Evolved style orientation sequence at the start so you can get to grips with this craziness. 2 analog sticks at the same time? Nah, this ain't gonna catch on. Clank won't be propelling you through the air, but the harsh fixed flips Ratchet would pull when strafe jumping at certain angles before are gone. You get much more mid-air control, allowing for the third-person bullet hell to feel all the more fluid when you're hopping around and everything's coming at you. At first, it might seem kind of disappointing that the game has reduced the weapon count to only 10 instead of the 20-something these games usually have.
Take note, everyone, if you ever play Deadlocked, play the PS2 version. The PS3 feels more like unfinished build of the an unfinished build of the game rather than the finished product. Yep. It's kind of funny.
But the way the arsenal,
which, by the way, some call me Johnny for some reason complaints about the lock strafe mode in this game. Oh, yeah.
has been streamlined, I actually find pretty cool. You can now buy status effects mods that can be switched out.
I don't like lock strafing for some reason, and honestly, they're just using the third person mode works really well, maybe even better for some places like the grind rails and stuff.
It's between weapons. So rather than have some lame sludge weapon in the game you never want to use, you can instead say buy the poison mod and slap it onto a gun you actually like. Ice, electricity, mini bombs, napalm, even a mod that makes enemies turn on each other can all be applied all over your arsenal. There's a real frantic nature to the combat here. Some of the enemies
Something
that attack
special
you melee style
about hearing a British person saying all over your arsenal
are now a lot more serious. They ain't just little bug dudes that come hopping towards you. You got zombies and these spike men that will straight up tear you to shreds. So some areas really have you on your toes as you're switching out weapons to deal with close targets while other dudes far away are shooting you. The game ramps up until by the end it's some of the most hectic combat in the series. Even the PS3's cell processor can't keep up with the madness in this 2005 PS2 game.
That's just because it's a bad port, though.
HUD in this game is really aesthetically pleasing. After ditching the CRT vibe of the first title, the games have struggled to find a visually appealing look for the heads-up display. But the one in Deadlocked looks slick, and hey, you can even change its color if you want the weird aberration that was the light orange design from 3 again. Furthermore, Ratchet's body language gets a more refined edge to it. Instead of appearing like he's a step away from T-posing his way through the game, he actually looks like he's ready for action this time around with his new battle stance. Turn on the extra unlockable to have him hold his blasters gangster style, and we finally have a Ratchet who looks like he's pumped to use his sick arsenal. When it comes to edgy looking cartoon rats with guns, if Shadow the Hedgehog is your weird low budget telenovela crime drama, then Ratchet Deadlocked is Breaking Bad. And the music, oh baby, Deadlocked has one of the best soundtracks in the series. I'd say when it comes to raw beats, it may even rank as a near second to the first game. It's a close one with our boy too, but just listen to this banger goodness.
It really reminds me of just an amped up one OST.
All this comes together to create one sick as hell fist pumping thrill ride. The game offers you 4 difficulties from the start, and even when I got this game for Christmas '05 at the tender age of 11, I always cranked that shit up to max for the ultimate experience. This is how you know you're dealing with the Ratchet Master, what can I say? Trust me, it's the way to play. Now, I'm not just going to sit back and ignore the fact that yes, because Deadlocked decided to go with this arena structure much akin to 3, most of the level design is pretty piss. Most of them feel like multiplayer maps with a bunch of force fields put up around them to fake some kind of semblance of structure. None of these locations are ever going to win prizes for feeling like expansive worlds to explore, but I mean, they're not super supposed to. Once you've come to terms with the fact you're playing a game show, that this is the shoot everything Ratchet game, it's not so bad. You're not told, hey, time to go to Blackwater City, kids.
Yeah,
except
absolutely.
When you get there,
I totally agree. It's just something about the setting that makes the lack of complexity in the levels not just believable, but also acceptable compared to 3.
Be one floating platform.
I honestly love the lock strafe controls, believe it or not. Well, that's cool. I mean, I don't, but that's fine. It's just maybe just because I've played and love 1 and to a certain degree 2 so much that I'm so used to using the third person controls. But honestly, I just think they're good enough. I mean, the lock strafing obviously has its advantages with aiming and stuff, especially with the flux rifle, as we've seen. But I just think it feels better, right?
When Orkson comes back from the first game as just some big square factory looking thing here, but you know that's going to be the case early on, it's less of a kick in the teeth. There's no pretension here, there's no corridor masquerading as the iconic Metropolis level. And some things are undoubtedly baller in the level design. Like, grind rails are back, maybe? Absent from 3, they make their triumphant return here, and now with a dual analog stick setup, you can grind along while aiming your guns at passing enemies. Sick nasty. Shout out, though, to one of the most baffling pieces of level design I've seen in the entire series. So here, you could take the optional grind rail all the way around to get these extra bolts, or you could just, do that, yeah, it's a bit awkward. The thing that tips Deadlocked over into the big leagues, though, what gets it my badass seal of approval, is the plot themes the game tackles. Unlike Ratchet 3, which had a very confused satirical tone, Deadlocked returns to the quality of the first 2 games with some of the best, most focused satire in the series. Deadlocked puts a laser focus back on the self-absorbed consumerism and celebrity culture-obsessed nature of the Ratchet universe. Throughout the game, our boy Ratchet gets slandered fake news style by the people running the Vox News network. Can you tell this was made in the mid-2000s? Who work for Gleeman Vox, the big multimedia mogul guy running Dreadzone. I love how they twist the events of previous
Vox
games to suit
Fox.
their agenda.
Vox News investigation has uncovered shocking, untold stories from his dark, sinister, evil past. The destruction of civic property, illegal hoverbike gangs, inadequate dental hygiene.
Ratchet is positioned as the scum of the earth to boost the profile of the arrogant Ace Hardlight, the #1 player in Dreadzone.
Because there is one man that can put an end to this menace, Ace Hardlight.
Ace Hardlight fans.
I just love how it's just being pushed out of the frame.
Prepare yourselves. I'm gonna make this one messy.
So that Gleeman can sell all his merch that's stacking up in his office like Hidekazu Yukawa's Dreamcast stock in Watch Shenmue. The hosts are constantly talking mad shit, trying to sway viewer opinion. They even speak over the gameplay as would be expected from a game modeled after TV sport tropes.
He's a Lombax. He spent time in prison. He hates candy and children.
But unlike other games that will go unmentioned, even though it would make total sense for them to be doing so, since they are literally providing live commentary, they actually don't speak every 2 seconds, and there are moments of silence. It's remarkably restrained when you take into account what Ratchet would later become.
Come and buy a pixelizer.
So what we
Jesus
have here is
fucking
a
Christ.
giant evil
Shut
media
up.
conglomerate trying to sway opinion, and the best part is that Ratchet proves once and for all that it's all bullshit.
Sales are down across the board except for fuzzy Lombax ears.
Well, you've obviously made some sort of idiotic mistake.
Ratchet's earnestness and actual heroism shines through all the crap. He gains fans anyway, rising to the top as the star.
Whoa, We hate you, Ratchet. You cheated.
Ratchet is a malicious criminal. He must be punished.
It's not terribly realistic, it's not in-depth satire, but it's a positive story in an otherwise dark, edgy title, and works seamlessly with the setup of the game and overall themes of the whole series. Gleeman Vox is a great villain, and in a way, in fact, he's kinda the final boss of this entire franchise. And I'm not saying that because all the games after this had kinda dodgy stories, but I mean, you could make that argument. You know, I might be on board with that. It's because he represents everything wrong with this universe. The obsession with making money and gawkish celebrity idealization that's led this universe to the brink of destruction countless times before. And as Ratchet, you don't just kick his ass, but you decimate his cynical world.
Oh yeah, that was the Gaming Brit show that made the meme of the pixelizer thing. Good. That's a great one. The reason why I prefer the lock strafe is because it feels like the player can use any weapons on any enemy slash boss the player chooses, no matter where the enemy is, kind of. Yeah, that's a valid reason. I don't like the lock strafe kind of because of that. It feels like every weapon it's just the same weapon, kind of. Like the fusion rifle, for example, it's just kind of now, if you use the lock strafe, now it's just a really slow and powerful dual raptor or dual viper, right?
Worldview. This was a universe where even heroes could be turned into products, but our hero, the outsider, incorruptible,
Don't let Fox do to you what he did to me.
stands up and brings down an empire.
We'll sell Ratchet action figures, Ratchet sports shoes, Ratchet deodorant, Ratchet breakfast cereal, earmuffs and cologne, soft drinks, hard drinks, energy drinks, breath mints. You get record deals, movie rights, reality shows, video games, and commercials. And there's no deal, Vox.
I think for some people it's easy to feel a bit disconnected from what's happening in Deadlocked, since a lot of it's told via news programs rather than a lot of interactions between Ratchet and other characters. But I think overall the notes this game's plot hits are really on point and a perfect climax to the PS2 saga. And more fitting than, say, the out-of-step, wacky, mad scientist comedy of Dr. Nefarious. And you know, heads up to you Ratchet 3 boys, I'm not trying to say 3 is some kind of dumpster fire. If you like it more than Deadlocked simply because it's still about Ratchet and Clank going about in their ship to different planets in their own time, that's fine, we're all friends here. The PS2 Ratchet games are the kind of games we don't see much of anymore, a great merge of comedy, satire, heart, platforming, shooting. In a way, this title is kinda the last of its era. As the game devs of the time longed to tackle more serious subject matter and more complex titles, what you could get away with pulling off both tonally and mechanically was being stretched to its limits in the cartoony mascot 3D platformer space. I mean, damn, Ratchet has frickin' Raiden nail claws in this game. We're pushing things to the absolute edge. And while you can kind of see why a lot of companies move towards creating more mature, adult-looking IPs to expand their conceptual limits, I do kind of miss aspects of this era where eccentric space platformers got to hit us with all this biting.
In my opinion, Gaming Brit Show Deadlocked video is better than the Golden Bolt video of Deadlocked.
Social commentary and shooting action.
Yeah,
I mean, we can now.
It's more entertaining, more to the point, I guess. Still, though, I appreciate what Goldie does, just because of how much information he's managed to collect.
I will take seriously Nathan Drake's relationship.
I think it's a different kind of video, honestly.
Drama because he's all realistic looking in that. But because he's a more realistic bloke with more realistic bloke abilities, jumping around has to be all slow and strict and climby and such. Remember Nathan Hale?
I kind of like the slow gameplay of Uncharted. Am I weird for that? Which is interesting since Goldie has talked about the Gaming Brit Show's vid on 2016 as one of the many who did not like that video. Huh, interesting. I remember it being really good. Weird.
You look like a real human guy.
I mean, it was entertaining, at least.
Memorable. It's harder these days to find really gamey game experiences on a mechanical level that also offer interesting universes full of thematic weight and character depth. And I wouldn't totally class the Ratchet games that came after this one as successful in that regards either. Point is, outside of just being a good game, Deadlocked is also a really interesting point in time, which I think warrants a revisit. Don't be put off by the spin-off looking ass box art. Deadlocked is well worth changing the channel to.
Alright, the Gaming Brit Show. That was pretty okay. I mean, it's not quite the kind of video I aim for with this work series. Well, it did make... I did find some ideas and probably some stuff I'm going to look further into on my own, but... true, both videos of Deadlocked reviews the game in their own unique way. Yeah. Well, it's pretty much stuff like getting facts wrong here and there, coming across as more of an asshole on the fact that the vid glosses over anything positive 2016 did, right? Oh yeah, like that. Well, yes, but then again, it's like, I think they're those two are two different types of creators. Although the getting facts wrong is kind of that's not good. Because you're at that point you're basically judging the game on something it isn't. But what did 2016 do positive? I guess the gameplay is good. Some would claim. But anyways, yeah, like I said. With these videos, I'm basically looking for ideas, maybe stuff I hadn't thought of before. So the videos like this is something I want to watch, but what I'm getting the most out of is usually videos like the Golden Bolt that has a lot of information and stuff. I've always wanted to review games as well. It's just that I still have some mental issues, which makes it hard for me to do any kind of video. Well, I don't know. You could argue that a lot of video game reviewers have mental issues, right? I don't know. Seriously, dude, go for it if you want to. Just write out a script. At least just try. See if it's anything you can be proud of publishing. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's just as simple as that. Like, literally send it to... If you ever decide to make one, send it to me and I'll watch it. Especially if it's on a topic I actually care about, or a game I actually care about. Anyways, those were the two videos I had lined up for today. What else do I have on my list? I have a video by Jay's Reviews. I have a video by Proxitists. I have a video by Nat Quirks. I have the Some Call Me Johnny video. I'm a bit unsure about the Super Butterbuns video. Just because it's more like... The title is Ratchet, Deadlocked for Beginners. And it's more like a overview type of video. I also have a Deadlocked video by Exo Paradigm Gamer, and then one by WeDude83. That's what I have on my list currently. The problem with Deadlocked is that there's not really a lot to choose from. Only Golden Bolt's video is even close to an hour. Jay's Reviews, JebTube, Junior Nitro, Mr. Jarhead, some of these guys are my favorites. As far as I'm aware, only Jay's did a Deadlocked video, right? I don't think... I haven't seen the others, at least. But I think Jay's and Exo Paradigm are the longest videos. And even those are like 30 minutes each or something. Some of these I'm kind of conflicted if I want to watch or not. Maybe I'll do it on my own time. With that said, I think we're gonna end the stream right here. We might do... I'm going to do at least one more stream next weekend, where we'll watch Jace and probably Some Call Me Johnny and a few others. Oh yeah, Jay and Exo have collabed before on the Quest for Buddha review years ago. Oh, okay. I'm gonna probably check that out then when I get to Quest for Booty. But yeah, I think we're gonna do at least one more stream for next weekend, which is gonna be Jay's reviews, Some Call Me Johnny, and probably a couple of the short ones, and then we'll see where we go from there. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining me. It's been a blast as always. It's fun chatting with you guys, and yeah, thanks for stopping by. See you later. Bye.